Arya Stark left Winterfell on a wind-swept morning, the dawn sky streaked with red-gold fire as the sun rose beyond the Wolfswood. She wore the leathers she had grown accustomed to in her travels, her boots scuffed by distant roads, her cloak a nondescript grey that had seen rain and snow and mud from the free cities to the King's Road. What she carried in her heart was as heavy as the snow-laden clouds that had hovered over Winterfell in the days before her departure. Duty, tinged with longing. She never thought she would return to the north under these circumstances. She never thought she would join the Night's Watch. Yet there she was, riding toward the wall with the faint echoes of ghosts in her mind. Her mother, her father, her brothers, all gone or changed beyond recognition by the war, the losses, and the long, unrelenting winter. She had survived everything from Harrenhal's horrors to Braavos' mysteries. She had tasted revenge and victory and solitude alike. But for all she had seen and done, Arya Stark felt an unshakable restlessness in her blood. Perhaps that was why, when she learned that the Night's Watch would allow women to join, or at least they would no longer bar them if they truly wished to swear the oaths, she made the choice no one could have predicted. She, the restless wanderer, would don the black. The notion was radical. The Night's Watch had been so diminished in numbers after the wars against the dead and the subsequent rebellions across the 7 kingdoms that they had no choice but to broaden their membership. Even so, the prospect of a woman on the wall was greeted with suspicion, derision, or outright contempt by some. But Arya knew the wall was built of old magic and older stone, and magic did not care for mortal rules of inheritance and tradition. If the realms of men could not protect themselves from the threats that still lurked beyond those frozen ramparts, then who better to defend them than a Stark, a daughter of the North, who had walked more roads than most knights and outlived men twice her size? She rode with only a single companion, an aging man-at-arms from Winterfell, who had insisted on protecting her as far as Castle Black. He kept his distance behind her, letting her lead the way. Though the roads were mostly empty, they passed scattered remnants of conflict, broken farms, scorched fields, shallow graves marked by crude stakes in the ground. The scars of war lingered, even if the living had moved on. Arya tried not to dwell on the ugly memories these signs evoked. She focused on the path ahead, the watchers on the wall, the oath that awaited her. In her pack, she carried a single precious memento, Needle. The sword was strapped carefully to her back, concealed beneath her cloak. It had been her constant companion on journeys across the narrow sea and back, a reminder of her family's love, of Jon Snow's gift. That sword had become a piece of her soul. More times than she could count, she had thought she lost her old self along the way. But Needle was proof that she was still Arya Stark, even under all those faces of no one. When she reached the King's Road's northernmost stretch and caught sight of the wall, she felt her breath catch. It was, as she remembered, an impossibly tall curtain of ice, shimmering in the weak daylight like a living thing. She had been here once before as a child. That memory held an almost dreamlike quality. She'd stood close to Jon, feeling small and wide-eyed before the colossal face of the wall. The difference now was more profound than mere height and age. She was no longer a child full of illusions about knights and monsters. She was a woman who had stood in the presence of true monstrosities, who had stared into the emptiness of death and known it for what it was. Castle Black itself had changed in the intervening years. After the long night, efforts had been made to rebuild portions of its battered structures. One could see new stonework reinforcing certain towers and walls. Yet it still looked grim and cold, a place shaped by centuries of desperation and vigilance. As Arya drew nearer, she caught sight of men in black cloaks going about their chores. Smoke rose in wispy columns from the old chimneys. The yard was muddy with half-melted snow. She guided her horse through the gates, ignoring the stairs. A few of the men paused in their tasks, heads turning to follow her passage. She dismounted quietly, patting her horse's flank in gratitude. Her companion trotted in behind, dismounted as well. They exchanged a brief look, one final moment of camaraderie. The man had never quite known what to say to her. She had caught his sidelong glances, and the slight wariness in his words, as though intimidated by her presence. And in truth, that was how she wanted it. She had no interest in forging close bonds at this moment, Not with him, not with anyone. She was here for a duty, for a purpose. "Will you be all right, my lady?" he asked, voice rough. "Arya," she corrected, though she did not expect him to adapt so quickly to the old childhood stance she had always taken. She was Arya, not a lady. "I'll be fine. Thank you for accompanying me." He glanced around at the unfriendly faces. I'll see myself back to Winterfell then." Arya offered a nod. "Safe travels." He left without further ceremony, and Arya was alone in the courtyard, or as alone as one could be beneath a dozen curious gazes. Someone barked her name, a voice she did not recognize. She turned and saw a tall man with a hooded cloak stepping toward her. He had a gaunt face, his beard flecked with gray. The cloak was black, but pinned with a silver clasp in the shape of a crow. "Arya Stark?" he asked, though there was a note of certainty in his voice, as if he could not imagine she was anyone else. She gave a terse nod. He bowed his head slightly. "I'm Steward Aethan, acting on behalf of the Lord Commander. Follow me." She walked behind him, ignoring the crunch of packed snow beneath her boots, ignoring the wide eyes of black brothers who whispered among themselves. She wondered at how many had actually remained from Jon's time. Some, but not many, she guessed. The watch turned over quickly, men lost to the dangers beyond the wall, or to the strife that still plagued the realm. Aethan led her past the stables, around a corner where an old well stood, and then up worn stone steps into the base of what had once been the commander's tower. They ascended a flight of spiraling stairs in silence, reaching a dim corridor lit by sparse torches. He stopped before a wooden door. "The Lord Commander will see you now," he said, pushing the door open and stepping aside. Arya entered. The chamber was not large. A simple wooden desk stood at its center, behind it a man in his middle years, with shoulders thick from a lifetime of swinging swords or hammers, she could not tell which. His hair was cut short, salted with white at the temples. A single dark eye studied her, the other hidden behind a patch. This was Lord Commander Domeric Storm, a bastard once pledged to House Baratheon, or so the rumors went. She had heard he was competent, fierce, and unwavering in duty. He rose to greet her, and for a moment she saw curiosity ripple across his rugged features. "Arya Stark," he said in a voice low and gravelly. The invitation was extended to all, but I did not expect a Stark of Winterfell to answer it. She inclined her head. "My family has always kept the north. The wall is part of that duty." Domeric studied her a moment longer. Then he gestured for her to sit on a wooden stool. He resumed his seat, pushing aside a scattering of parchment. She noticed a battered copy of the Annals of the Night's Watch among the papers, open to a half-torn page. "It seems you are determined, or so Aethan tells me," the Lord Commander said. "You want to join our ranks." "I do." He let out a slow breath. "You know the terms, do you? The vow is for life. No lands, no titles, no marriages or children. All your old allegiances must fall away. Are you prepared to forsake Winterfell? Your name? Your inheritance?" "No." Arya recalled how easily she had once cast aside her name to become no one in Bravos. This was different, in a sense, but also oddly familiar. "My name will always be mine," she said softly. "But yes, I know the vow. I accept." Domeric nodded. "I hear you have seen more of the world than most, that you fought dangers unimaginable." Arya's mouth quirked at the corner, almost a smile without warmth. More than I care to remember." He clasped his hands. "The watch is not what it used to be, as you can see. We've had to relax old traditions to survive. Allowing women to join our ranks is the most controversial change. Some within the Seven Kingdoms think us mad. Some of our own men hate the idea." "Nonsense." She said nothing. She had faced worse than hateful words. "But we need swords," Domeric continued. "We need people of skill who believe in what we do here. The threat of the others may have passed for now, but the wild north is not safe. Raiders, stray whites in the frozen wastelands. There are rumors of necromancers stirring in the lands beyond the Shivering Sea. Who knows what the future holds? If you truly wish to take the black, then we'll not turn you away." A faint flicker of gratitude ignited in Arya's chest. It felt like a small bright spark in a place of ice. "I wish it." "Then it shall be," Domeric said. "You will join the new recruits. You will take the vow in front of a heart tree. You will train as all do. I suspect you'll surpass them quickly, but the training is part of the custom." "Understood." "Ni, no via no wall." Arya nodded, rising to her feet when he did. He extended a calloused hand and she grasped it. The moment felt surreal, as if years of wandering had led her to this single handshake in a cold chamber at the edge of the known world. "I'll speak with you again on the morrow," the Lord Commander said. "Welcome to Castle Black, Arya Stark." "Nay, Elvico." That night, she was given a small cell in one of the towers. It was cramped but private enough. A single straw-filled mattress lay on a simple bunk, a narrow window overlooked the courtyard, and a brazier in the corner offered a meager glow. As darkness fell, she listened to the murmur of the wind against the stones, to the distant sound of men bickering and laughing and cursing in the yard. It was a strange comfort to be among men of the Night's Watch again. Her thoughts drifted to Jon, how once he had given up everything for his vow. She remembered how proud he'd been to join, how determined he was to protect the realm even as others belittled the Watch for being full of criminals and outcasts. Even now, she didn't entirely understand what had become of Jon. He had been exiled beyond the wall, some said. Others told stories of him venturing east toward the land of always winter. She suspected he was somewhere out there, still wearing black in his heart if not on his shoulders. Perhaps she would see him again. The thought both terrified and thrilled her, but she told herself not to hope. Too many times she had hoped, only to be disappointed. Better to accept the unknown and do her duty. Her dreams that night were tangled. She saw flashes of faces, her mother's grieving eyes, her father's stern smile, her sister's regal bearing, her brother Robb with a crown of metal teeth. She saw the faceless men of Bravos, their silhouettes drifting through dark corridors. She saw the hound scowling at her, and she saw Gendry's grin in the flickering shadows of a forge. When she woke, breath catching in her throat, the brazier had burned low. She rose, stripped off her sweaty tunic and dressed in clean clothes. It was still early, but she decided she might as well explore her new home. She padded down the tower steps, ignoring the few black brothers who mumbled greetings on their way up or down. Outside, dawn tinted the sky a pale grey. A few men were already in the courtyard, forging swords, patching walls, or caring for horses. She nodded politely at them but offered no conversation. She was never talkative in the mornings, and likely never would be, especially here. Beyond the yard lay a narrow walkway that overlooked the gate. She ascended to it, peering out toward the horizon. The wall's massive presence loomed on her other side. She could sense it more than see it, the cold radiating from that colossal barrier of ice. She thought she might climb it later, or at least ascend the elevator to its top to see the view that Jon once saw every day. In time, the bells rang to gather recruits for training. She followed the small group that trudged across the yard. Some of the men looked young, boys near the age she had been when she had first wielded Needle. Others were older, perhaps criminals or poachers or second sons with no inheritance. A few eyed her with open scorn, but she kept her face blank. Let them think what they would. Their instructor, a tall woman with short-cropped hair and a scar across her cheek, awaited them in the training yard. Arya was mildly surprised to see a woman in that role, but she recalled Domeric's words. They needed all the skill they could get. This was likely one of the first female rangers to have served here. Her name was Willa Harte, Arya soon learned, a former Hedge Knight's daughter. She had joined the Watch a year earlier, proven herself fearsome with both sword and spear, and now was in charge of drilling new recruits. Willa introduced Arya to the group without fanfare, telling them that everyone there was equal in the eyes of the Night's Watch. The only advantage one has here, Willa said, is skill and determination. If you lack either, you will not last. From the corner of her eye, Arya caught one of the older recruits rolling his eyes. She recognized him as the type who thought himself too good to be taught by a woman. Let him think so. She had learned to let actions speak louder than any retort. They began with simple sword forms. For Arya, it was a dance she knew by heart. She recalled the water dancing she had learned in Bravos, how to move lightly on her feet, to lunge and strike with precision. She had trained with warriors of many lands, faced assassins and knights. These clumsy recruits were no threat to her. But she forced herself to follow Willa's orders, to hold back as much as necessary while also ensuring her form was perfect. Even so, her skill quickly became apparent, drawing sideways stares and muttered observations. The older man, who had rolled his eyes, made an effort to embarrass her during a spar. He lunged recklessly, aiming a blow at her ribs. She slipped under the blade with ease, sweeping his legs out from under him. He landed hard on the packed ground and Arya could hear the breath whoosh from his lungs. She held the practiced sword at his throat before he could recover, her eyes cold. "Surrender," Willa said, her voice dispassionate. "He is done." Arya nodded, stepping back. A flush of anger colored the man's cheeks as he scrambled to his feet, but he said nothing, swallowing his pride in front of the others. That was enough for Arya. She had no desire to gloat. She remembered the hound's voice in her ear, all those years ago, mocking her illusions about knights and honor. She had since learned that fighting skill meant little if it wasn't tempered by purpose. Training continued through the morning. They moved on to archery, then to lessons on the geography of the lands beyond the wall. Arya listened carefully to all of it. She knew better than to assume she already understood everything. She had been beyond the wall just once, briefly, and never ventured very far. If she was to serve as a ranger, she would need every scrap of knowledge. Tales of hidden caverns beneath glacial ridges, of savage beasts prowling the dark forests, of remnants of the free folk who might still be hostile. She recalled her mother's stories about her uncle Benjen, a first ranger who vanished into the wilderness. She felt a sting of sadness but buried it, forcing her mind to remain present. When the bells tolled for midday, the recruits filed off to the common hall for a meal of bread, thin stew, and ale that tasted watered down. Arya found a seat at the edge of a long wooden table, removing her gloves so she could tear the bread without fumbling. She felt every bit of the curious eyes upon her, not just from the recruits, but also from the black brothers around them. A few women were scattered among the crowd, though they were outnumbered heavily. She saw them glancing her way as well, some with open curiosity, others with a guarded friendliness. Willa sat across from her, setting down her bowl of stew. "You move well with a sword," she remarked, loud enough that a few others could hear. "Where did you learn?" Arya took a sip of ale. "Bravos at first, also from men in Westeros. I've had many teachers." Willa nodded. "You were wise to pay attention. You'll find we have no time for coddling here." She hesitated, then lowered her voice slightly. "There are some who resent you for being a highborn lady, pardon me, for being highborn, and for being a woman." Arya shrugged. "I won't." She had dealt with such resentment all her life, in different forms. She did not expect that to change now. Besides, the Night's Watch was not about forging friendships. It was about defending the realm. If she needed to stand alone, she would. But something in Willa's gaze told her the other woman was offering the olive branch of camaraderie. Arya considered it for a moment. The idea of having an ally here was not unwelcome, so she inclined her head in acknowledgement. Perhaps, in time, they would find a sense of mutual respect. Nah. Days turned into weeks. Arya's training advanced swiftly. By the end of the first fortnight, she bested every recruit in sparring matches. She practiced with real steel whenever possible, though Willa insisted on limiting such sessions to avoid accidental deaths. The Watch could not afford unnecessary losses. Her nights were often spent on the ramparts, walking along the top of the wall after braving the rattling lift that carried her aloft. Up there, the wind howled like a living thing, and the world stretched out in endless white on one side, while on the other side lay the lands of the north, dotted with distant lights from travelers or small villages. She thought of John often. She wondered if he had once stood in that exact spot, gazing at the same horizon, torn between duty and love. Some men in the Watch were beginning to speak her name with something approaching respect, A few, however, became increasingly bitter, especially those who prided themselves on their martial skill. One night in the common hall, after a long day's drills, two men cornered her near the hearth. Both had been in a watch for more than a year, not recruits but still new enough to resent any upstart. "You think you're better than us, girl?" one snarled, half drunk. He was missing several teeth, and his breath stank of sour ale. Arya calmly regarded him. "I don't think about you much at all." His friend barked a laugh. "Oh ho, she's got a tongue on her." "Aye, and a sword too," Arya said, standing her ground. She did not reach for her blade, though her muscles coiled with tension. She knew that drawing steel in the common hall would bring trouble. But so would letting them think she was an easy mark. "Watch your mouth," the first man growled. "You might think you're special with your fancy sword, but—" A hand clamped on his shoulder. Arya looked up to see Willa looming behind them. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, voice low. The men turned, swallowing. Neither liked the fact that a woman, especially one with authority, had caught them in the act of intimidation. "No problem," the toothless man mumbled. Willa looked from them to Arya. "Then be on your way," she said quietly. "We have an early patrol tomorrow. I'd recommend you sleep off that ale." They glowered but moved off, shooting Arya a final glare as they left. Arya returned to her seat, feeling her pulse settle. Willa joined her, crossing her arms. "Confrontations like that might only get worse," the older woman warned. "You're making a name for yourself, and not everyone likes it." Arya exhaled slowly. "Then let them come." Willa gave a half smile. "Yes, I'm sure you'd like that. But even for someone as skilled as you, it's dangerous to fight multiple foes at once. Best keep your wits about you." Arya appreciated the counsel, though she said nothing. She was reminded of the cat and mouse dance she had played in King's Landing so long ago, as a girl skulking in secret passages. Danger was never far, but it made her feel strangely alive. Still, she was no longer a child. She had to think carefully, especially here, where unity was supposed to matter. She could not afford to split the Watch's loyalties by waging private battles. Her vow demanded more of her than personal vendettas. Then, the day of her official vow arrived. She and several other recruits stood beneath the heart tree in the small godswood behind Castle Black, the white bark etched with a solemn face, red sap tears frozen in place. Snow drifted lazily around them, though the wind was calm. The silence felt absolute, broken only by the crunch of boots and the quiet chanting of their oath, led by Lord Commander Domeric Dot. Arya spoke the words clearly, her breath steaming in the cold air. "Night gathers, and now my watch begins." She felt the old power of the North settle into her bones. She recalled Ned Stark's voice in the godswood of Winterfell, his gentle instruction, the warmth of his presence. For a moment, time folded in on itself. She was a child again, believing in the power of the old gods, trusting in the living hearts of weirwoods. Then she was an adult, forging a new path of her own making. She had come full circle, but was not the same person anymore. When the vow was done, Domeric placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are now a sworn brother of the Night's Watch," he said. "Or sister, if you prefer." She gave a small nod but did not smile. She had never been one for outward displays of emotion. Yet inside, something glowed, like an ember of pride mixed with relief. She was part of something bigger now, something that mattered. That same evening, they feasted in the common hall as best the Watch could manage, salted pork, turnips and weak ale, with a single cask of stronger spirits brought out for the occasion. Arya kept to a corner table, not wanting too much attention. Nonetheless, some men came to toast her or to ask for stories of her travels. She answered briefly, leaving out details that might be too gruesome or personal. She had learned that most people wanted tales of excitement, not horror. They wanted to believe in heroes. She knew the truth was more complex. She felt a pang as she remembered traveling with the Hound, how she once wished him dead, then later discovered a begrudging respect for him. She remembered the cold, hollow revenge she inflicted on men like Polliver and Rorge. She remembered the quiet corridors of the House of Black and White, the smell of candles and poison. Her life had been a tapestry of blood and shadows. Now she stood in the black once more, hoping that tapestry might serve a better cause. Lord Commander Domeric gave a short speech, thanking the new recruits for bolstering the watch's dwindling numbers. He reminded them all that winter might be passing, but the duties of the watch never did. The north is vast, and we do not know what lies beyond, he said. We must remain vigilant, united. He looked directly at Arya at that final word, as if aware of the tensions. She held his gaze calmly. She would do her part to keep the peace, but she would not shrink from challenge. At first, Arya expected to serve as a ranger. Her skills suited it. She was adept at moving stealthily, tracking and fighting. But Domeric had other ideas. He assigned her to rotate between the 3 branches of the watch, rangers, stewards, and builders, so she could learn all aspects. I want you to know every corner of the watch, he told her. We are small now, and each of us must wear many hats. Besides, it may give some who doubt you a chance to see your commitment. She obeyed, though she yearned for the open wilderness beyond the wall. She spent weeks assisting the builders, hauling stone, repairing fences, learning how the architecture of Castle Black was designed to withstand crushing snowfall and biting gales. She grew stronger in the process, her muscles aching by the end of each day, though she never complained. She found a subtle satisfaction in the work of her hands. Then she spent time with the stewards, learning to manage supplies, care for the ravens, and keep track of the meager coin the watch possessed. She discovered that her Bravosi knowledge of sums helped with the accounts, and that her skill with animals, honed in her younger days, made her a decent hand in the rookery. Samuel Tarley was a legend among the stewards, she learned, though he had long since gone south to serve as Grand Maester. They spoke of him with a sort of fond reverence for his intellect and gentle spirit. Arya wondered how the world might have changed if Sam had not found the knowledge that helped defeat the dead. A small man with a large heart, shaping the fate of kingdoms. Finally, she rotated to the Rangers. There, she felt most at ease. She patrolled with a small band led by Willa, venturing beyond the wall for days at a time. They slept in makeshift camps, forging forward through forests of towering pines and rime-coated larches. They tracked signs of wildling activity, found occasional footprints in the snow, though rarely did they encounter anyone. Once, they came across a tiny group of free folk, 3 men and 2 women, who eyed them warily. The Rangers let them pass. There was no reason to fight. The war had ended, and the free folk were now permitted to settle certain areas with the king in the North's blessing. The real threat, Willa believed, was not the free folk, but the unknown pockets of dark magic that might linger. There were rumors of a sorcerer stirring in the far northeast, near a glacier known as the Frozen Fang. The watch had no direct evidence, but stories filtered in from traveling merchants or wandering crow hunters. Strange lights in the sky, missing people, wolves found torn apart. The Rangers, stretched thin as they were, could do little beyond investigating what they could manage. Yet every time they ventured out, they found only silent forests, endless snowfields, and wind that carried the memory of old horrors. During these journeys, Arya learned to rely on her instincts more than ever. The wilderness reminded her of the faceless darkness that had once haunted her dreams. Each night, as she lay in a thin bedroll, she listened to the quiet hush of pine needles stirring in the breeze, her senses sharpened by the knowledge that unseen eyes might watch them from the trees. But no enemies came. On one such patrol, Willa quietly pulled Arya aside when the others were setting up camp. The older woman studied her with a kind of cautious pride. "Domeric told me to keep an eye on you," she said. "He suspects you'll rise quickly in our ranks." Arya frowned. "I'm not looking to rise. I only want to serve." Willa quirked a brow. "So you say. But you are Ned Stark's daughter, and you've done more in your short years than most of us do in a lifetime. People are noticing." "Nye." Arya felt something flutter in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was fear or anticipation. She'd spent so long being a solitary figure, forging her own path, that the notion of leadership felt both alien and burdensome. "Let them notice," she said, trying to sound casual. "It changes nothing." Willa gave a half smile that suggested it might change everything. Now, weeks turned into months. Each cycle of the moon, Arya would return from a patrol, weary and cold, only to throw herself into sparring sessions and training new recruits. She had quietly taken on a role assisting Willa with sword instruction. She never officially asked for the responsibility, but Willa recognized Arya's ability to demonstrate forms and footwork. Soon enough, men and women alike were lining up to watch or learn from her. It surprised Arya to realize she enjoyed teaching. In some small way, it felt like she was passing on the lessons Sirio Forel had once given her, the calm instruction on how to be quick as a cat, smooth as water. Some nights she would catch her reflection in a polished piece of metal, a slender face framed by dark hair grown slightly longer. She'd see the hardness in her own eyes, a hardness that had not been there as a child. She wondered if her mother or father would recognize her now, beyond the shape of her jaw or the tilt of her eyes. She wondered if she cared. She was Arya, that was enough. She would not apologize for how she had survived. Winter's grip loosened gradually. The nights were still cold, but the days showed a hint of warmth, and the snow began to melt in patches around Castle Black. With the thaw came new challenges. The road south opened up, and merchants brought wagons of supplies. Along with the supplies came rumors of fresh turmoil in the south. Petty lords vying for power, bandits ravaging the riverlands, a sickness in the Vale. Arya listened politely to the traveling peddlers, but she felt no urge to return to that world of intrigues and crowns. Her place was here now, under the vow of the Black. The Lord Commander often met with her privately, discussing the state of the watch and potential assignments. Arya learned that Domeric valued her perspective. She sensed he was grooming her for a role of leadership, though he never stated it plainly. He asked her opinion on patrol routes, on the distribution of men among the three branches, even on negotiations with the free folk. She answered honestly, drawing on her own experiences and knowledge of the North's wild terrain. Little by little, she felt the shifting atmosphere at Castle Black. More men and women began to see her, not just as an anomaly, a highborn woman who had taken the Black, but as a genuine force for good. Rumblings of discontent still existed, but they were fewer. When she walked through the courtyard, many would nod or greet her by name, and not always with the old mocking sneer. Oh. The decisive change came on a day thick with grey clouds, when word arrived of a large, aggressive band of raiders harassing travellers near the coast east of Eastwatch by the sea. These raiders were said to be free folk who had split from the main group led by Tormund Giantsbane years back. They had refused to settle peacefully, instead moving south to plunder and raid. Eastwatch's garrison was too small to handle them, and so a raven flew to Castle Black, pleading for reinforcements. Domeric summoned Arya, Willa, and a handful of other seasoned rangers. "I want you to lead a detachment to Eastwatch," he told them, his voice grim. "Collaborate with the garrison there, find these raiders, and put an end to their attacks. If they will not surrender, you must do what is necessary." "Nay." Arya listened intently, eyes flicking to Willa, who gave a curt nod. The older woman had a fierce glint in her eye, clearly ready for the challenge. Arya felt that quiet burn of determination too. This was precisely what the Watch was meant to do, protect the realm from threats beyond the wall. Even if those threats came from fellow humans now, not the undead. 2 days later, Arya rode at the head of a column of 24 black brothers and sisters, with Willa by her side. Domeric had granted them a few pack horses laden with supplies. The journey to Eastwatch was grueling. They followed a winding path along the foot of the wall, encountering ice-choked streams and half-frozen terrain that tested the stamina of both horse and rider. But Arya felt alive, the cold wind lashing her face, her senses on edge. Upon arrival, the small garrison at Eastwatch greeted them with evident relief. The commander there, a grizzled man named Tyrek, outlined the situation. The raiders numbered around 30, possibly more, and they struck mostly at night, vanishing into the rugged coastline caves. Local fisher folk were terrified. 1 or 2 had been killed when they resisted. "Cunning," Tyrek said, scratching at his unkempt beard. "They know the land. We've tried to chase them, but we don't have enough men to surround the caves. They slip away like ghosts." "No, they say." Arya's mind went to work, recalling her own experiences of stealth and ambush. "We need to scout their hideouts first," she said, Then coordinate an assault or a negotiation if they're willing, but we can't just rush in blindly. Willa agreed. That night, Arya volunteered to lead a small scouting party along the rocky shore. They went on foot, hoods pulled up against the biting wind. The moon was thin, offering little light, but Arya's eyes had grown accustomed to the dark. She moved silently, as did the others she selected, men and women she trusted not to botch a stealth mission. They found tracks in the damp sand, the telltale footprints leading around a jagged cliff. The distant roar of the sea masked their approach. As they crept closer, they spotted a faint glow emanating from what looked like a cave entrance. Arya signaled the others to hold back. Cautiously, she moved closer, flattening herself against the rock. She could hear voices inside, speaking the rough dialect of the free folk. At least half a dozen by the sound of it, laughing and bragging about the goods they had stolen. Salt fish, furs, even a bit of coin. One voice mentioned wanting more, planning to strike a merchant's wagon rumored to be passing in a few days. Arya slunk back to her group and shared what she'd heard. They decided on a plan: return at dawn with reinforcements, surround the cave, and demand their surrender. If they refused, they would fight. The next morning, just as the sun's first rays touched the coastline, 24 watch members positioned themselves along the cliffs. Arya and Willa approached the cave entrance openly, armed and resolute. At the sight of them, a few wildling sentries yelled warnings, but it was too late. The watch had them pinned. "We want to speak," Arya called, raising a hand to show she had not yet drawn her sword. "Lay down your weapons and we can negotiate." A tall wildling with tangled hair and a heavy axe emerged from the cave, flanked by others. His eyes flicked to the men and women in black, noticing how they stood in formation at vantage points above. "We're free folk," he growled. "We don't kneel to kneelers." Arya's voice carried a steely edge. "We don't ask you to kneel. We ask that you cease your raids, or face the consequences. The Night's Watch protects the realm, and you're threatening it." "Ah," he sneered. "You're a woman. Do your brothers hide behind your skirts?" She felt a flash of anger but reined it in. "I am a sworn brother of the Night's Watch, and this is your last chance to surrender. Enough blood has been spilled." Some of the wildlings behind him exchanged glances, uncertain. But the leader spat on the ground. "Run back to your wall, little crow. We take what we want." He hefted his axe. Arya exchanged a quick look with Willa. This would not end peacefully. They had the advantage in numbers and position, yet these wildlings were cornered and desperate. A desperate enemy can be dangerous. The leader let out a roar, raising his axe. Arrows flew from the watch archers perched above. Arya darted forward, narrowly avoiding a wildling wielding a rusty sword. She drew needle with a swift motion, slicing a deep cut across the man's arm, disarming him. Another wildling rushed her. She ducked low, pivoting behind him, and struck him in the back of the knee, sending him sprawling. Around her, the fight raged. Willa faced off against two raiders, her long sword glinting in the early light. The watch's disciplined approach held firm. Archers picked off wildlings who tried to flee toward the mouth of the cave, while others engaged in close combat. A savage cry drew Arya's attention. The leader with the axe charged at her. She had barely enough time to raise needle in defense. The axe crashed against her blade, sending vibrations up her arm. She sidestepped, letting his momentum carry him past, and slashed at his side. He grunted in pain but swung again, forcing her to hop back. He was strong and wild but not as quick. Arya's footwork saved her from his heavy blows, circling him until he exposed a gap in his guard. When he raised the axe high to chop down, she lunged in, driving needle into his torso with cold precision. He staggered, dropping the axe. Arya pulled the blade free, blood steaming in the cool morning air. The wildling dropped to his knees, glaring at her with hatred, or perhaps grudging respect. She met his gaze with quiet resolve. He tried to speak, but only blood bubbled up from his lips. A moment later, he collapsed. The rest of the raiders, seeing their leader fall, either surrendered or died fighting. By the time the skirmish ended, a handful of wildlings lay dead or wounded. The watch had suffered injuries, but nothing too dire. Those wildlings who threw down their weapons were bound. After the dust settled, Arya walked among the bodies, ensuring none needed urgent aid. Some of the raiders moaned in pain. She felt a pang of pity, recalling that these were once proud free folk who only wanted to survive. But their methods left little room for mercy in the eyes of the realm's laws. Willa joined her. Her face was streaked with a bit of blood, not her own it seemed, but she appeared grimly satisfied. "You fought well," she said softly. Arya nodded, eyes distant. "Let's see if we can help those who are wounded. Eastwatch can decide what to do with them." Nearly. The news of their success traveled quickly, borne by ravens and the tongues of travelers. The raiders' threat was ended, and the commerce route along the coast was safe once more. The men and women of Eastwatch toasted Arya and Willa, praising their swift, decisive action. Even the captives, once they had been tended to and given a chance to speak, seemed to respect the skill of the crows that had bested them. When Arya and her detachment returned to Castle Black, Lord Commander Domeric greeted them in the courtyard. The entire watch had turned out, and a few spontaneous cheers arose as Arya passed through the gates, leading the column of black-clad rangers. She felt heat rise to her cheeks, unused to such open adulation. Willa merely smirked at her side, looking equally embarrassed. Domeric approached on foot, nodding in approval. "Well done," he said, his gaze taking in the exhausted but triumphant group. "Eastwatch sent word of your victory." Arya dismounted, moving stiffly from hours in the saddle. "We did what was needed," she said simply. I'd like to speak with you in my solar," Domeric said, his voice leaving little room for argument. She followed him, ignoring the curious stares and quiet murmurs. Her mind drifted to the memory of the wildling leader's last breaths, the warm spray of blood against the cold air. The price of duty, she told herself. The cost of protecting the realm. In Domeric's solar, he offered her a seat by the fire. After removing his gloves and cloak, he studied her for a long moment. "You impress me, Stark." She shifted slightly, uncomfortable with praise. Anyone would have done the same. He gave a soft snort. "Not everyone. Your leadership and skill saved lives. The Watch needs that. I need that." He paused, resting his hands on the back of a chair. "I've served as Lord Commander for 7 years now. In that time, I've seen us rebuild from the brink of collapse. But I'm not a young man. My injuries ache. My eye grows weaker. I suspect I will not hold this post for many more years." Arya regarded him with puzzlement. "You have many good men and women here. They could—" "Yes," he interrupted. "I do. But I've made my decision. In time I will step down. Or the Watch will decide on a new Lord Commander through the election we've always held. And I believe you, Arya Stark, should be one of the candidates." Arya. She stared at him, speechless. The notion seemed absurd. She was still relatively new to the Watch. A woman had never held the position of Lord Commander, never in thousands of years of recorded history. Surely the men would not accept it. Domeric raised a hand to forestall her protest. "I know what you're thinking. It's madness, yes, but these are changing times. We've already allowed women into our ranks. The Watch must evolve or perish. And if you ask me who among us has the skill, the integrity, and the presence to lead, your name is at the top of the list." Arya felt her heart thumping in her chest. "I never asked for power," she said quietly. "Those who do not seek it are often the most worthy of it," Domeric replied, a weary smile tugging at his mouth. "I won't force your hand. When the time comes, the Watch will hold a vote. If you wish to stand, you will have my support, as well as the support of many who have fought by your side. If you do not, that is your choice. But consider what good you can do in that position, the changes you can bring." She remembered standing outside the House of Black and White, uncertain if she had the courage to become no one. She remembered standing before the faceless men, forging her own path despite the fear. This was that same feeling, that sense of standing on the cusp of something monumental. The title of Lord Commander was not a trivial honor. It was an ancient responsibility that had shaped the fate of the realm more than once. If she accepted, if she were elected, she would be carving a new path for the Night's Watch, a path that opened its doors to all who truly wished to serve. Could she bear the weight of that mantle? I'll think on it, Arya said at length, her voice subdued. Domeric inclined his head. That's all I ask. Oh. Days passed. Arya went about her duties with a new, unsettling awareness. Everywhere she looked, she noticed members of the Watch watching her with veiled curiosity or outright approval. A few still harbored resentment, but the majority saw her as a hero for quelling the raid on the coast. She found she could not move through the castle without someone greeting her or offering thanks. Even among the newest recruits, her legend was growing. She hated it in a way. She had never sought fame or power. It reminded her of Gendry's unwilling claim to Robert Baratheon's legacy, back when he was just a boy at Yoren's side. She recalled how she once teased him for it, neither of them realizing how the tides of fate would shift. Now it was her turn to stand in the path of destiny. In quiet moments, she spoke with Willa. The older woman's advice was frank. If you can shape the Watch for the better, why not do it? We both know the dangers that lurk in the north. We need a strong leader, someone who understands how to fight, how to teach, and how to unify. Leonard Cat. Arya voiced her concerns about tradition, about men who would never accept a woman in the highest seat. Willa shrugged. You've shown them you can fight as well as any man. You've shown them leadership in the field. Many are grateful. True, some will grumble, but what can they do if the majority votes in your favor? Arya then confided her deepest concern. What if I fail? What if the next threat to the realm is more terrible than these raiders, and I lead us to ruin? Willa gripped Arya's shoulder. Every commander carries that fear. If you did not, you'd be arrogant and dangerous. The fear keeps you cautious, but not timid. Trust your instincts. The gods, old or new, know you have them. The turning point arrived in late spring when a raven came from Hardhome, brought by a free folk courier. Reports of monstrous creatures sighted along the frozen eastern coast, twisted beasts that might have once been wolves or bears. The messenger claimed that a handful of men from his village had gone to track these creatures, and never returned. Others said they saw an eerie glow in the nights, reminiscent of the times the dead walked. Panic spread quickly among the watchers on the northern coast. Some believed it was a false alarm, others whispered of the others returning. Lord Commander Domeric did not dismiss the possibility lightly. He gathered his officers, including Arya and Willa, and they debated what to do. The Watch had limited manpower, scattered across Eastwatch, Castle Black, and the Shadow Tower. Domeric himself was in poor health these days, a persistent cough racking his body. He had no illusions about riding to Hardhome personally. Finally, he turned to Arya. You know the North's dangers. You've traveled farther than most. Will you lead a party to Hardhome and investigate? Arya's lips pressed into a thin line. It was no small request. Hardhome was notoriously difficult to reach, perched on a desolate stretch of coast. But the stakes were high. If the others or some twisted vestige of their magic had returned, ignoring it could be disastrous. She glanced at Willa, who gave her a determined nod. Arya turned back to Domeric. Yes, I'll go. They left within a day, a group of 15 rangers on horseback. The journey took them east of Eastwatch, then north along treacherous coastal paths, often forced to dismount and lead their horses on foot. The wind battered them, howling across jagged cliffs. Once or twice, they had to scramble to find shelter from sudden storms. Morale stayed relatively high, though tension simmered beneath the surface. Everyone feared what they might find at Hardhome. When they finally arrived, the sight was grim. The settlement perched near the water was partially collapsed, as if a storm had battered it. The air was thick with a smell of decay, though no bodies were immediately visible. The people they encountered were haggard, hollow-eyed. A handful recognized the black cloaks of the Watch and ran to them, begging for help. They spoke of disappearing neighbors, of strange howls in the night. Some claimed to have seen monstrous shapes prowling the tundra. Arya organized a search party at once, ordering the majority of her rangers to remain in Hardhome to protect the survivors. She took Willa and 3 others to scout the nearby forests and cliffs. For 2 days they found little, only the faint tracks of large creatures, the occasional smear of blood on trees or rocks. Tension mounted. At night, They huddled around small fires, listening to the wind shriek like tormented souls. On the third day, at dusk, they heard a chilling cry echo from deeper in the pines. It was unlike any animal Arya knew. Raw, guttural, laced with an almost human anguish. Willa's face went pale. "Seven save us," she whispered. "Or the old gods." They followed the sound cautiously. The trees parted to reveal a clearing, its snow trampled and stained with red. At the center lay a mangled carcass of what might have been a deer, though it was hard to tell. The body had been torn apart, entrails scattered. Large paw prints surrounded it, shaped like wolf tracks, but far bigger. "What manner of beast could do this?" muttered one ranger. Arya looked around, every hair on her body tingling. "Keep weapons ready," she murmured. They heard another cry, closer this time. Then a shape loomed from the gloom. An enormous wolf, its fur matted and streaked with dark patches that looked like rot. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dying light, an unnatural blue-white reminiscent of whites. It bared jagged teeth, releasing a growl that sounded almost distorted, as though two voices overlapped. "Gods!" Willa breathed, raising her sword. The creature lunged. Arya darted aside, slashing at its flank. Her blade glanced off hide that felt tougher than normal. The beast whirled, snapping at another ranger, who yelled as teeth clamped on his arm. Blood spurted. Willa thrust her sword into the wolf's side, but the creature barely flinched as if it felt no pain. Arya realized with mounting horror that this was no ordinary wolf. It bore the taint of whatever dark magic the others had once used to reanimate corpses. Yet it moved with living speed, not the slow shuffle of a wight. A half-living, half-dead abomination. She dodged another snap of the beast's jaws, plunging needle into its throat. The wolf let out a shriek, rearing back. Blackish blood spattered onto the snow. It tried to turn on her again, but Willa and the others closed in, hacking desperately. After a frenzied assault, the creature finally collapsed in a twitching heap. Even then, its eyes glowed faintly. Arya gritted her teeth, hacking at its neck until the head separated from the body. That glow extinguished. They panted, hearts racing. The ranger who was bitten groaned, clutching his bleeding arm. Arya tore a strip of cloth to bind the wound. Willa poked the wolf's corpse with her sword, a look of grim disgust twisting her features. "What in the name of all gods is this?" Arya shook her head. "A white wolf of some sort, but not fully dead. We have to assume more might be out there." They found 2 more mutated wolves that night, smaller but still formidable. They slew them with similar efforts, then realized the threat extended beyond just wolves. Hardhome was surrounded by packs of these things. Over the next days, more attacks came, sometimes in daylight, sometimes at night. The watchers on the palisade shrieked warnings as bestial shapes prowled the perimeter. Arya took charge, ordering the villagers to stay within barricaded houses, stationing rangers on rooftops. They fought off the wolves with fire and steel, losing 2 men and wounding several more. In the aftermath of the chaos, Arya knew it was unsustainable to keep these people in Hardhome. The settlement was too exposed, with too few defenders. Relocating them to safer territory south of the wall was the only viable option. But that meant organizing a mass evacuation along treacherous coastal paths. Arya set her jaw, feeling the weight of command settling on her shoulders in a way she had not fully experienced before. "All right," she announced to Willa and the few surviving members of her patrol. "We'll gather the villagers. We'll form a caravan. The Watch will guard them on the journey to Eastwatch. From there, we can arrange longer-term resettlement." "No, Willa nodded, though her expression was grim. "It's going to be dangerous. Those beasts will follow us if there are more in the woods." Arya shrugged. "Then we'll kill them on the way." And so they did. The procession of frightened villagers, guarded by the black-cloaked rangers, inched southward at a grueling pace. Wolves harried them, sometimes in packs of 2 or 3, sometimes singly. Each time, the Watch fended them off, though at great risk. Arya personally slew 6 over the course of their retreat, her arms growing numb from the repeated clashes. She felt no satisfaction, only grim determination. By the time they reached Eastwatch, the caravan was ragged but alive. A few more had died, but more had been saved. The commander of Eastwatch stared in disbelief at the monstrous wolf carcasses they dragged back, eyes widening at the sight of the corrupted flesh and glowing eyes. Arya's face was set. "We need to send word to Castle Black, to Winterfell, to the new king in the north. Anyone with power to help us. This might be the beginning of something worse." Nay. The ravens flew. Within days, a response arrived from Domeric, short and urgent. "Return with haste." Arya and her rangers left the exhausted villagers in the care of Eastwatch's garrison, then made the journey back to Castle Black. The entire time, her thoughts whirled with the new threat. If these half-undead beasts were roaming the far north, who knew what else might be lurking? She recalled the icy visage of the Night King, the terror of the undead hordes. They had defeated him, or so they thought. But evil had a way of surviving in shadows. Upon arriving at Castle Black, Arya went straight to the Lord Commander's sola, passing Black brothers who hurried aside to let her through. Inside, she found Domeric hunched over a table, coughing harshly. His face was drawn, his eye bloodshot. He waved off her concern, standing tall with obvious effort. "You've done well," he said. "We've received word from Winterfell. The king in the north is concerned. He's sending men to reinforce the Night's Watch." Arya felt a flicker of relief. Additional forces might tip the balance if these creatures spread. "We'll need them," she said. "I've seen what's out there. We can't hold them off forever as we are." "No." Domeric coughed again, then fixed her with a steely gaze. "I cannot lead us in this new war. My health is failing. I've spoken with the senior officers. A vote must be called." Her heart kicked. She had avoided thinking about the election, about the possibility of becoming Lord Commander, focusing on the crisis at hand. But now the crisis was here, and a leader was needed. Domeric placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "Will you stand? Will you see this through?" Arya breathed deeply, her thoughts racing with memories of all she had lost and all she had gained. Her vow echoed in her mind, "It shall not end until my death." She raised her eyes to Domeric's. "Yes," she said. "I will stand for the vote." Whoa. Castle Black buzzed like a disturbed hive in the days leading up to the election. The tradition was for each sworn member of the Night's Watch to write the name of their choice on a piece of parchment, placed in an urn. The senior officers tallied the votes. Normally, multiple candidates presented themselves, each campaigning in subtle ways. But this time, rumor quickly spread that Arya Stark had Domeric's endorsement, and few dared to stand against her. One or two tried, veterans who believed an older, more experienced man should lead. But those men garnered little support compared to the wave of loyalty and respect Arya had earned. On the day of the vote, every sworn member in Castle Black, Eastwatch, and the Shadow Tower who could travel arrived to cast their ballot. Worn tables were set up in the common hall, the urn at the front, guarded by 2 stewards. One by one, Black brothers and sisters placed their votes. Arya watched from a distance, silent, her heart pounding though her face remained composed. She thought of Jon, how he once was chosen as Lord Commander. She wondered if he felt the same tumult of emotions, uncertainty, pride, a sense of inevitable fate. She found herself wishing he were here to see it, to guide her. Then again, maybe she no longer needed guidance. She had become her own person, shaped by more roads than even Jon had walked. At last, the ballots were tallied. The senior officers filed onto a small dais at the front of the hall. Domeric stood with them, pale and breathing raggedly, but determined to see this through. He read the results in a voice that carried across the hall. "By the will of the Night's Watch, Arya Stark has been chosen as the 1.00 Lord Commander." A hush fell, broken by a surge of cheers and applause, though some stood in stunned silence. Arya felt as though the floor had dropped from under her. She walked forward, head high, to stand before Domeric. He placed the traditional cloak, black and trimmed with fur, on her shoulders. "Lead them well," he whispered, too softly for others to hear. Arya turned to face the assembled watch. She saw a sea of faces, some filled with admiration, others with guarded acceptance, a few with suspicion or outright envy. She drew in a breath, feeling the cloak's weight as if it were the mantle of every Lord Commander before her, from the Stark who built the wall to Jorah Mormont, to Jon Snow, to Domeric Storm. She spoke simply, "I am Arya Stark, sworn brother of the Night's Watch. I shall defend the realms of men against any who threaten it, living or dead, human or monster. The Watch has stood for thousands of years. We have endured when kingdoms crumbled, when the dead rose, when winter itself sought to end us. We will endure again." Some shouted in agreement. Will led the others in banging their fists on tables or shields. Arya's gaze swept across them, fierce pride and solemn duty warring in her chest. She was the first woman to hold this post, but she would not be the last if she had any say in it. The times were changing, and the Night's Watch needed to change with them. In the days that followed, she wasted no time. Her first order was to establish a clear plan for dealing with the threat of these white beasts. Scouts were sent north in greater numbers, armed with dragonglass weapons and steel. Ravens flew to Winterfell detailing their strategy, requesting additional supplies and men. She coordinated with Eastwatch and the Shadow Tower, ensuring they had proper defenses and leadership. She listened to the council of senior officers, gleaning wisdom from those who had served longer, but she was unafraid to make decisions her own way. The news spread throughout the realm. Arya Stark, sister to the king in the north, had become Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Reactions varied from disbelief to awe to outrage among traditionalists. But none could deny the Watch was in dire times, and they needed a commander who understood the evolving threats. The old cloak felt heavy on Arya's shoulders, but the burden was one she chose to carry. Each day, she walked the courtyard, greeting recruits, sparring with rangers, conferring with stewards, overseeing the builders as they repaired the worn battlements. She made sure to lead by example, not by fear or aloofness. Her presence on the training fields inspired some, rattled others. But no one questioned her commitment. When she wrote letters to the Southern Lords, she signed them simply, Arya Stark, 1.00 Twond Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. It felt surreal, yet undeniably right. The girl who once named herself No One had finally found a name, a title, and a purpose no one could strip away. In quiet moments, standing atop the wall, she stared out over the endless expanse of ice and forest. She felt the wind biting her cheeks, heard it whisper secrets of the deep north, secrets of ancient magics and unborn dangers. She knew the real test was yet to come. If those monstrous wolves were only the harbingers of a greater darkness, she and the Watch would need every ally they could find, every ounce of strength and cunning. But she was not afraid. She was Arya of House Stark, a wolf of the north, the first woman to lead the greatest brotherhood of men and women that had ever stood in defense of the living. She had walked too many roads to falter now. If winter came again, or if nightmares rose in the cold wastes beyond the wall, she would be there to meet them, needle in hand, a legion of black-cloaked warriors at her back. "I am the sword in the darkness," she whispered to herself, echoing the vow she had taken. "I am the watcher on the walls." And for the first time in a long while, Arya Stark felt wholly, undeniably at peace with who she was, and who she would become. Arya Stark slept little in the nights following her election as Lord Commander. Exhaustion claimed her in small moments, a minute or two dozing at her table, or lulled by the warmth of the brazier in her quarters, but true rest eluded her. Each time she closed her eyes, the memory of those monstrous wolves haunted her, their eerie, half-rotted faces snarling in the dark. She would wake with a startled breath, her hand leaping to needle's hilt. The nightmares passed, but the weight of responsibility did not. Every dawn she rose, dressed in the black wool and furs of the Watch, and emerged into Castle Black's cold corridors. She told herself she was no stranger to hardship. She'd faced horrors across the sea, horrors in war, horrors in quiet halls where men whispered of revenge. But this burden was different. She had sworn an oath, and she had ascended to a station that demanded both wisdom and courage. When she was a wandering girl, she could rely on her own cunning to survive. Now hundreds of lives looked to her for guidance. On the first morning of her command, she went to the courtyard and found it crowded. Black brothers and sisters hustled about, some off to gather supplies, others to prepare for patrol. Men with bandaged arms carried swords to the smithy. A small group of new recruits, startled young faces, hovered near the armory, unsure what to do. Near the stables, horses snorted as groomsmen saddled them for the day's tasks. Though the day was brighter than usual, it was still the north. Clouds clung to the sky like a second layer of grim stone. She caught sight of Willa Harte near the armory door, instructing a sullen recruit on how to hold a training spear. The older woman's voice was firm but patient, her short hair hanging over her forehead. Arya watched a moment, thinking how strange it was that only months ago, she'd been the newcomer among them. Now Willa was teaching recruits in Arya's name, and every corner of Castle Black stood ready for her word. Without speaking, Arya stepped forward and plucked the spear from the recruit's grip. Hey! She demonstrated a better stance, turning sideways, feet planted solidly, eyes level with the imaginary foe. Willa nodded in approval. The recruit tried to mimic Arya's movement, though his form remained stiff. Arya reminded herself that not all learned as quickly as she had. The boy would need time and patience. When she'd finished, Arya returned the spear and left them to it. She had other concerns. A builder approached, a lanky man named Louis, who had come from the Vale after running afoul of some petty lord. His gaunt face shone with sweat despite the chill air. "My Lord Commander," he said, giving a short bow. "We've begun reinforcing the tower foundations as you asked, but the supply of quarried stone is running low. We can't do much more unless we get fresh shipments from Winterfell or White Harbor." "Nay." Arya acknowledged him with a nod. "I'll see that ravens are sent. In the meantime, use what you have for the most urgent repairs, particularly the walls that face the largest storms. The rest can wait until new supplies arrive." Louise looked relieved at her directness and nodded before hurrying away. Across the yard, another steward was waiting, a short, round-faced woman named Jane, who had scribbled notes all over a scrap of parchment. The scuff marks on her boots suggested she had run across the castle more than once this morning. "Lord Commander," she said, voice breathless. "The quartermaster at Eastwatch has sent word. They're running short on dragonglass arrowheads. They also ask for more salted fish to feed the families they shelter. There's a shortage along the coast since the raids." Arya gave a faint nod. "We'll do what we can. As soon as we have confirmation from Winterfell that reinforcements are coming, he'll request shipments of fish from White Harbor and Bear Island for dragonglass." She paused. She remembered how crucial it had been during the war against the dead. "There should be a cache in the cellars here. If that's not enough, we might need to send a party to Dragonstone, where the deposits are abundant. But for now, gather what we have and prepare to transport it to Eastwatch at first opportunity." "Yes, my Lord Commander," Jane said, already scratching new notes. The tasks continued in an unending stream. Requests for more cots in the infirmary, updates on patrol routes, complaints about stolen rations, arguments among recruits. Each matter was small on its own, yet together they formed the bedrock of the watch's functioning. Arya understood with a jolt of irony that her father's lessons on rule, lessons she'd once thought herself too wild to heed, had found her again. Ned Stark had always carried the burdens of detail and duty. Now she did too. Near midday she gathered her senior officers in the old solar that had once been Jean Mormont's, then Jon Snow's, and most recently Domeric Storm's. The round table was scarred by years of use, and thick pillars of candle wax melted in the corners, giving off a faint odor of tallow. Arya took the high-backed chair, feeling its worn wood press against her back. Willa sat to her right, a strong presence that gave Arya comfort. Across the table sat Ethan, the steward who had first greeted her when she arrived at Castle Black. He wore a worried frown that deepened the lines around his eyes. Also present were Gerard Rivers, a soft-spoken man who led the builders, and Roderick Hill, a gruff veteran whose skill with archery was unmatched. Each had proven themselves in the Watch's defense for years, though Arya sensed they were still coming to terms with the fact that a young woman now commanded them. Yet the fear of the white beasts, and the memory of the dead walking, kept most dissent quiet. At this juncture, they all wanted a leader who could protect them. Arya believed she could be that, or she would die trying. "Reports from Hardhome and surrounding areas remain grim," Ethan said, his fingers tapping the table. Our scouts spotted more of those rotted beasts prowling the coastline, though they haven't staged a direct attack on the settlement we evacuated. Eastwatch is now hosting 300 refugees, mostly free folk. Willa leaned forward, arms folded. We can't contain so many at Eastwatch forever. They're not prisoners, but they're stuck behind the walls, afraid to journey farther south. Many want to cross the wall permanently, settle in the Gift or further, but some houses might object. Arya thought of the northern lords who still harbored distrust toward the free folk. Jon Snow had made progress bridging that ancient divide, but old animosities ran deep. The king in the north gave his word that the free folk could settle the lands if they kept the peace. That is as valid now as ever. I'll send a raven to Winterfell, asking them to prepare farmland or territory where these people can go. If we don't act quickly, hunger and disease will strike Eastwatch as refugees. We can afford an outbreak or conflict between them and our own men. Roderick Hill spoke up next, rubbing his calloused hands together as though to dispel a chill. That's fair, Lord Commander. But we have to be careful. The men are on edge. They've been told stories of the dead rising again. They whisper that the others might return. Fear breeds foolishness. If we start sending resources to feed free folk, some black brothers could feel neglected. Yes. Arya scanned the table. We need a balance then. Food for our own, but also enough to keep the free folk alive. Starvation will only create an angry mob. Have the stewards start dividing rations more carefully. Everyone sacrifices a bit, but no one starves. She paused, her thoughts shifting to the root of the problem. The real danger is that these beasts might be the first sign of something bigger. I need to know how they were created. Are they whites or something else? Did we fully destroy the Night King, or has a remnant of his magic persisted? We need knowledge, which means we may need to consult old lore or find mages who understand such dark arts. A short silence followed. Most of the men and women around the table were practical soldiers, not scholars. They didn't know where to begin. Arya sighed inwardly, recalling how Sam Tarly had once scoured the Citadel's archives for secrets about the Long Night. If only Sam were still here, or if he could find new answers. Perhaps she would send him a raven as well, though the Citadel was not always forthcoming to the watch. Finally, Gerd Rivers cleared his throat. If the old stories are true, the children of the forest once had powerful magic. Maybe something of theirs still lingers in the far north, twisting creatures with the residue of the dead's magic. Could be, it's not the others returning, but some leftover enchantment in the land. Arya rubbed her brow. The truth was, they knew too little. She could order more patrols, more forays into the wilderness, but that would risk more lives. And if these beasts were only the start, she forced herself to focus on the immediate tasks. For now, we secure the wall and our outposts. We help Eastwatch handle the refugees. We keep the realm informed, so Winterfell can mobilize reinforcements if it worsens. Let's distribute the dragonglass we have. Train new recruits in how to use it, and remind everyone that fire is their ally against such magic. Dismissed. They stood, each of them bowing their heads. Willa lingered a moment, waiting until the others had gone. Her dark eyes regarded Arya with concern. "Are you well?" she asked quietly. Arya lifted a shoulder in a half shrug. "I'm alive. You look exhausted." "I am," Arya admitted, recalling how she jolted awake from nightmares hours ago. "But I can't rest yet. The threat's not over." Willa squeezed Arya's forearm lightly. "Remember, you're not alone now. You command a legion of watchers who would follow you into the darkest forest. Let them shoulder some of the burden." Arya managed a faint wry smile. "I remember." She left the solar and retreated to her quarters only briefly, to snatch a few bites of bread and salt fish. Her quarters still bore Domeric Storm's lingering touches, a worn rug, a battered trunk filled with old maps, a half-finished painting of the wall that he'd once attempted in better health. Arya hadn't had the heart to clear it out yet. Perhaps she never would. Legacy mattered, even if it wasn't her own. Within minutes, another steward arrived with a new problem. 2 builders had gotten into a fistfight, each claiming the other stole his ale. Arya sighed and went to mediate. Such was her day. a litany of small crises woven around the larger danger beyond the wall. Late in the afternoon, a horn blast echoed across Castle Black. Arya hurried to the yard where men were gathering near the gates. She saw riders approaching, 5 horses, struggling through mud and slush. At their head rode a tall man clad in northern furs, carrying the banner of House Stark, the direwolf, grey on white. Arya's breath caught. For an instant, she wondered if Jon had returned at last. But the rider was older, bearded, with streaks of silver in his hair. He was no one she recognized immediately. Willa came up beside her. Reinforcements from Winterfell? Likely, Arya said, stepping forward as the riders passed through the open gates. She kept her face impassive, though her heart thundered. She had not set eyes on any of her northern kin, except for the occasional messenger or distant cousin, in a long while. The man dismounted. Under the thick cloak he wore a surcoat bearing the direwolf sigil. "Lord Commander," he greeted, voice booming. "I am Lord Alaric Slate. I serve the king in the north as one of his chief captains. He sends his respects, and these men, to aid you." He gestured to the other riders, who wore House Stark or House Glover badges. Arya nodded. "Welcome to Castle Black. You've come a long way. Are more on the road behind you?" "Oh." Lord Alaric gave a brisk nod. "Hey, 200 men follow. They'll arrive in small parties so as not to strain the horses in this weather. We have supplies, food, medicine, and some arms, though not as many as we'd like. Winterfell is preparing to send more once the road's clear." Arya studied him a moment, trying to see if he recognized her as the young girl she once was. But his face showed only polite respect, like a lord who spoke to any high officer. Perhaps he did not know her, or perhaps he pretended not to. Either way, she felt a pang. She had spent so much of her life as a ghost in her own lands. "Thank you," she said. "You're needed here." He hesitated, glancing around at the courtyard's bustle. Some men in black stared with undisguised curiosity at the new arrivals, and a few women among the watch looked on with guarded interest. "The king asked me to deliver a message," Lord Alaric said. "Winterfell stands ready to support the watch in its mission. If the danger beyond the wall grows, the North will marshal its forces, but you must keep us informed. What have you learned about these abominations?" Arya glanced toward Willa, who gave a slight shrug. She turned back to Alaric. "We only know they're wolves, perhaps other beasts too, affected by a twisted magic that resembles the White Curse. They're faster than normal whites, still alive in some sense. We can kill them with steel or fire, but it takes far more effort than an ordinary animal. We suspect there may be larger packs roaming the frozen coast. Hardhome is no longer safe, and Eastwatch is overrun with refugees." "No." Alaric's brow furrowed. "Then my men will be of some use. I have archers, spearmen, a few knights. If you wish it, we can help defend Eastwatch, or join any expedition north." Arya appreciated his straightforward offer. She took a breath, already juggling possibilities in her mind. "Your men will need rest, and it might be wise to station them here at Castle Black first, to get them acclimated. Then we'll decide how best to deploy them. For now, you and your riders are welcome to warm yourselves in the common hall. I'll have the stewards see to your needs." Alaric gave a grateful bow. "As you say, Lord Commander." She watched him lead his horses away, feeling an odd swirl of emotions. It reassured her that the North was behind her, yet it also reminded her that she was no longer truly part of her family's world. She was the Night's Watch now. The Black Cloak was her home. When she turned, Willa was still at her side. The older woman's gaze flicked from the departing Northerners to Arya's face. "Is it strange," Willa asked softly, "to see your own sigil flying without it being yours?" Arya weighed the question in silence. "It's always been mine, but it belongs to the North too. I suppose that's what matters." Willa inclined her head. "They'll look to you now, especially with so many new fighters arriving. You'll have to lead them as well as the Watch. We're all in this together." "Yes," Arya agreed, though the magnitude of her role pressed on her shoulders once more. "We are." She excused herself and made her way back through the courtyard, climbing the worn stairs to the top of the wall. The lift rattled around her, pulled by ancient winches, rising higher and higher until the courtyard below looked like a scatter of dark ants on a white field. At last, the platform creaked to a stop, and she stepped onto the thick ice. Her boots crunched, the wind immediately whipping at her cloak. The temperature dropped so sharply that her breath came in ragged plumes. A handful of sentinels walked the wall's edge, scanning the horizon. They turned to nod respectfully as she passed. Arya continued alone, approaching the parapet that looked north. There, the endless expanse of ice and snow stretched toward misty mountains on the horizon. In that direction lay Hardhome, Craster's Keep, and 1,000 unnamed forests dotted with hidden dangers. She remembered traveling that way with John once, though she was so young then that most of her memories blurred. She pressed her gloved hands on the cold stone lip, gazing at the fierce beauty of the north. Scenes flickered in her mind, the scattered remains of monstrous wolves, the frightened faces of the free folk huddled around meager fires, the sensation of the House of Black and White's unending corridors, as if the ghosts of all her past decisions stood behind her. Yet she would not falter. Quietly she murmured words she had not uttered in a long time. Vala Morcalis, a Braavosi phrase meaning all men must die, but for Arya Stark, it was also a reminder that fear of death could not rule her. If these beasts were harbingers of a new threat, if the other's magic was not fully extinguished, she would stand firm. She was Lord Commander now. All her life had led here, to the edge of the world, with the weight of the living upon her shoulders. She didn't stay long up there. The cold was too bitter, and she had too many tasks waiting. But she inhaled the sharp wind, letting it clear her thoughts. Then she descended back into the hubbub of Castle Black. That evening, a muted feast of sorts was held in the common hall. The new arrivals from Winterfell mingled with the Black brothers and sisters. Tables were crowded with steaming bowls of stew, wooden cups of ale, and lanterns that cast flickering light across weary faces. Arya sat with Willa, Alaric, and a few of the senior watch officers at one long table near the hearth. Lord Alaric was describing the king in the North's current concerns: banditry in the Riverlands, a plague outbreak near Gulltown, skirmishes along the Iron Islands, and how they limited the number of men who could be spared for the watch. Arya listened, though she found herself glancing around the hall. She noticed how some of her own men regarded Alaric's soldiers with a mix of suspicion and envy. The Black brothers had few comforts in life, while the Northerners wore well-made cloaks and boasted of mead halls. She made a mental note to handle any tension that arose. The last thing they needed was fights between allies. Alaric broke her reverie. "I must say, Lord Commander, your men speak highly of your leadership. They tell stories of how you pacified the raiders near Eastwatch and saved Hardhome's people from those cursed wolves." Arya, uncomfortable with praise, shrugged. "I did what I had to do. The Watch stands for the realm, no matter who threatens it." He nodded, sipping from his cup. "I served under your brother once during the war. King John was different from other leaders, solemn, but with a fierce sense of duty." A pang lanced through Arya. She looked down at her own cup, swirling the thin ale. "Yes," she said simply, remembering how Joan's eyes shone with determination whenever he spoke of protecting others. Alaric seemed to sense her discomfort and changed the topic. "This hall is more crowded than I expected. It's good to see the Watch recovering. Not so long ago, these benches would have been half empty." Arya glanced around. "Many are criminals or outcasts, but they came willingly, or with no better choice. The Watch has changed. We accept anyone who will uphold the oath, even women. Our numbers grow because the realm still fears the North's secrets." Alaric gave a faint smile. "Let them fear. Better they fear and prepare than forget and die." Before Arya could reply, Willa caught her eye with a small gesture. Arya leaned in. Willa spoke quietly. "We've had a few incidents in the courtyard tonight, scuffles between some of our men and the Northerners. Jean and Ethan broke them up, but tension's running high." Arya set her cup down and sighed. "We'll address it in the morning. Post extra guards to keep watch. I won't have men brawling when a real danger lurks beyond the wall." Willa nodded and left to see it done. Arya excused herself from Alaric shortly after, stepping outside into the crisp night air. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light over Castle Black's towers. Voices and laughter spilled from the hall behind her, but she walked alone toward the training yard, where shadows crisscrossed the ground. She paused in the center, gazing up at the towering wall. Torches flickered along the ramparts. In the distance, she heard the soft hum of the wind. Every breath reminded her that she was the shield that guarded the realms of men, and women, and free folk, and everyone else who lived under the sky. The magnitude of it weighed on her again, but she wouldn't yield. Winter might be passing, but darkness still clung to the corners of the world. She turned and made her way back, exchanging a final word with the guard at the door. Then she climbed the stairs to her chambers, locked the heavy door behind her, and sank onto a simple wooden chair. A single candle burned on the table. She removed her gloves, massaged her wrists. Her body ached from hours of tension. In her mind's eye, she saw the face of the monstrous wolf again, blue-white eyes shining with hate. The memory was too vivid. She wondered if these creatures felt any pain or fear, or if they were puppets of a darker force. She wondered if the dreaded White Walkers were truly gone. She wondered if she might soon face an army of reanimated beasts, prowling at the realm's doorstep. Eventually, she doused the candle and lay on her narrow bed. Sleep would come in fragments, as it always did, haunted by shapes of teeth and ice. And, LSA. The next morning, she rose before dawn to meet with Lord Alaric and Willa, both of whom stood in the courtyard with a cluster of men. Winter's tail had not quite let go, and the sky threatened more snow. Horses stamped their hooves, plumes of steam rising in the cold air. Alaric had donned heavy leather gloves. Willa wore her usual short-brimmed helm that guarded her brow. "We'll dispatch a scouting party to Hardhome," Arya said, voice level. "Let's see if the packs of white wolves have grown or moved inland. I want to know how many remain, and if there are other creatures similarly afflicted, we'll gather direct intelligence, then return. If the threat is too large to handle with a single party, we'll plan a major expedition." Alaric eyed the men around him. "I'll send half a dozen of my best riders with you. They're woodsmen mostly, used to the northern forests, and of course I'll come myself if you'll have me." Arya studied him. He was older, perhaps in his 40s, but still robust, with a soldier's endurance in his posture. "Very well," she agreed. "We'll leave at first light tomorrow. 10 from the night's watch, 6 from your men, plus Willa and me." Willa nodded, a faint grin tugging her lips. "It'll be good to see how these northern riders handle real rough terrain." Alaric took no offense, giving a wry chuckle. "We'll do our part." Arya turned to the Black brothers standing by. "Spread word. Any who volunteer should be ready by tonight. We'll need rations for at least 10 days. We might not be able to rely on hunting if the forests are overrun by those beasts." They broke to prepare. Arya spent much of the day organizing supplies. She visited the armory to check the stocks of dragonglass-tipped spears and arrowheads. She spoke with the stewards to ensure the rosters were set for those remaining behind, with enough watchers on the walls. The day blurred into a stream of tasks. Shortly after midday, Willa approached with a serious expression. "We have a problem," she said, voice quiet so others wouldn't overhear. Roderick Hill was found unconscious near the stables. He was battered, bruised. A couple of Alaric's men were seen running from the area. Arya's jaw tightened. "What sparked it?" Willa shook her head. "No one's sure. Might have been an argument over a dice game. Or maybe old grudges. You know how men can be after too many cups of ale." Arya grimaced. Roderick was one of the more respected rangers, and an assault on him was an affront to the unity she was trying to foster. "Have we questioned Alaric's men?" "They deny involvement, of course, but we have at least 2 Black brothers who claim they saw them. So far, none of Alaric's men are admitting guilt. Roderick's still out cold, so he can speak for himself." Arya paused, wrestling with the decision. She couldn't allow crimes within the walls to go unpunished, but she also couldn't risk alienating the North's reinforcements. The entire alliance rested on a delicate balance of trust. "I'll speak to Alaric," she decided. "He must handle his men. If that fails, we'll hold a tribunal. The Watch's justice will prevail if they don't settle it. I won't have lawlessness here." "No, Willa inclined her head. I'll get the details ready. When Arya found Alaric later, he was inspecting the row of horses in the stables. She observed him from a short distance before approaching. He looked tired, his brow knitted. The stable hand stood aside, clearly intimidated by the presence of a northern lord. Arya came up behind him, quiet as a cat. "Lord Alaric," she said. He turned. "Lord Commander." At once, he registered her somber expression. "What has happened?" She explained what Willa had told her. Alaric's lips thinned. "We do not condone brawling or violence against our allies. Give me the names of the accused. I will see they are punished." "I don't have their names yet," Arya admitted. "They wore your house cloaks, that much is known. But I'd like to avoid a witch hunt. If your men are to serve with the Night's Watch, they must obey the same discipline as we do. This can't go on." Alaric rubbed his forehead. "I will speak to them. If I find out who's responsible, they'll answer for it. You have my word." Arya studied his face, searching for any hint of insincerity. She saw only determination and a hint of embarrassment. She decided to trust him. "Thank you," he sighed. "This might be the first time many of my men have come this far north, let alone lived among the Watch. They're anxious. Rumors about abominations in the wilderness haven't helped." Arya nodded grimly. "Fear is a disease. It can rot from within if we let it." Alaric touched the pommel of his sword. "We'll stamp it out. You have my loyalty, Lord Commander." She inclined her head and left him to his thoughts. Unity was fragile, but she would not let it shatter. That evening, she took supper alone in her quarters, too weary for the crowds of the common hall. A single bowl of stew and a heel of bread were all she managed. As she ate, she glanced at the old maps Domeric had left spread on a table in the corner. She stood and moved to them, picking up a candle to read the fading lines of the far northern coast. Hardhome was marked by a small symbol, overshadowed by jagged drawings of mountains and ice floes. To the west lay the Bay of Seals, a cold, perilous area. Beyond Hardhome lay even more remote shores, some uncharted. She dragged a fingertip over the parchment. The trees near the shore were rumored to hide caverns. Some said the others had once built twisted altars there. Legends, or so the old storytellers claimed. Now she feared those tales might hold a grain of truth. She remembered traveling with the Hound, hearing him scoff at ghost stories. She remembered Bravos and the House of Black and White, where illusions and truths blurred. She remembered the gentle, steady presence of her father in the Godswood, telling her that the man who passes the sentence must swing the sword. Responsibility was at the core of everything her family believed. She murmured to herself, in the quiet, "I'll do what must be done." Tomorrow, she would lead the scouts north, searching for more signs of the twisted beasts. It would be the first true test of her leadership as Lord Commander. She had faced danger before, but never with so many depending on her decisions. She tried to push down the anxiety in her chest, telling herself she was ready. She had to be. Dawn came in a wash of pale grey light. Arya assembled her expedition near the gate. 10 Night's Watch Rangers stood ready, each armed with a bow, a blade, and at least one weapon tipped with dragon glass. Alaric arrived with 6 of his men, all mounted on sturdy northern horses. Willa was there, double-checking saddlebags. The gatehouse stood open. A frosty breeze blew in from the northern wastes, carrying the scent of pine and distant sea salt. Beyond the wall lay a vast wilderness of brittle forests and snow-choked hills. Somewhere out there, the threat lurked. Arya tightened the straps on her horse's saddle. She had selected a lean mare with nimble feet, a mount better suited for rough terrain than a heavy warhorse. The mare stomped impatiently, sensing Arya's own tension. When everyone was ready, Arya faced a steward holding the gate's chain. "Open up, we ride." The steward nodded, and the gate creaked wider. Their small column passed through. Immediately the wind bit sharper. Arya pulled her cloak tight, leading them onto the rough trail that wound north and east. Alaric rode beside her. Willa stayed at the flank, ensuring stragglers kept pace. They traveled in silence at first, horses plodding through patches of old snow. Skeletal trees lined the path, branches clacking in the breeze. A hush lay over the land, as though nature itself held its breath. Arya felt the memory of years long gone, when the dead rose in droves, lurking just behind every crooked trunk. Around midday they reached a fork in the trail. One branch curved northwest, toward a sparse forest where the trees grew thick with pale lichens. The other veered northeast, eventually leading to the coast and Hardhome. Arya signaled them to stop. She consulted a ragged map, comparing it to the distant silhouettes of peaks. Hardhome is at least 3 or 4 days' ride from here, maybe longer if the weather turns. She glanced at Alaric. This route is rumored to be the most direct, but it's also close to where we found those white wolves before. Alaric shrugged. We could take the safer path to the northwest, circle back along the shoreline, but that might add 2 days. Arya looked at her rangers, noting their resolute faces. They had come prepared for danger, not to skirt around it. If the beasts are out there, best we find them first. We go northeast, watch. No one voiced an objection. They turned onto the narrower path, pressing deeper into the unknown. Shadows lengthened as afternoon stretched toward evening. The terrain grew rougher, with ridges of rock jutting through the permafrost. Each step of the horses dislodged pebbles and chunks of ice. They set up camp at dusk in a small clearing protected on 3 sides by a natural rock wall. Willa and 2 rangers cleared the area of dead branches, stacking them for a fire. Alaric's men pitched simple tents. Arya scouted around the perimeter, ensuring no sign of fresh tracks. The wind whistled through the trees, an eerie refrain that made her remember the howls she'd heard that terrible night near Hardhome. As darkness fell, they gathered around a small fire. The horses were tethered close, shifting uneasily. Arya sensed their nervous energy and kept a watchful eye on the perimeter. She recalled that the white beasts often attacked at night. Willa stirred a pot of beans and salted pork, glancing at Arya. We should set a guard rotation. No one sleeps unprotected. Arya nodded. Agreed. 4 watches at a time, split into shifts of 2 hours each. She turned to Alaric. Is that acceptable for your men? He nodded. We'll take our share of the watch. He eyed the surrounding darkness, as if searching for movement in the shadows. It's quieter here than I expected. Arya listened to the wind. Quiet often hides danger. They ate in silence, each lost in thought. Once the pot was emptied, men spread out bedrolls or found spots against the rock to lean their backs. Arya, Willa, and Alaric divided the shifts. Arya took first watch with one of Alaric's soldiers, a lanky youth who wore a badge bearing a small sunburst, perhaps some lesser house allied to the Starks. They stood near the edge of the clearing, weapons close at hand. The youth tried to strike up conversation, asking Arya if she'd ever been to the Neck or visited Moat Cailin, but she answered in monosyllables, her attention fixed on the trees. Eventually the young man fell silent. Arya heard only the soft crackle of the dying fire and the rustle of branches overhead. An hour passed, maybe 2. The moon rose behind scudding clouds, painting the clearing in pale silver. Arya kept her gaze sharp, scanning for any sign of movement among the trees. Occasionally she thought she heard a rustle, but it was only the wind. Then a low growl drifted through the night air, so faint she almost doubted it. Her body tensed. She signaled the young soldier to stay quiet. Together, they strained to hear more. A moment later, the sound came again, closer. A guttural rumble, as if from a throat not entirely natural. Arya turned, softly calling Willa's name. The older woman stirred awake, immediately alert. She rose, gripping her sword hilt. Alaric and a few others stirred as well, quietly gathering weapons. They moved to the edge of the firelight, forming a defensive semicircle around the sleeping men. Another growl, this time from the opposite side of the clearing. Arya realized with a jolt that they might be surrounded. Her pulse thumped hard. Memories of those half-rotted wolves snapped into focus. She gripped Needle, the leather-wrapped hilt reassuring in her palm. The horses grew agitated, snorting and stamping. One whinnied in alarm, straining against its tether. Willa cursed under her breath. They're coming. Alari's voice was quiet but firm. "Form up. Bows ready." A pair of archers notched arrows, stepping behind the line of swordsmen. Arya signaled them to hold fire until they had a target. The growling multiplied, an unsettling chorus echoing through the trees. Then shapes flickered at the edge of the darkness. Arya glimpsed fur, skeletal frames, eyes that gleamed with sickly light. The beasts prowled closer, half hidden by branches, cautious but intent. She counted at least 4, but there could be more circling around. Arya swallowed. She remembered how hard these creatures were to kill. "Aim for the head or spine," she murmured. "Or burn them if you can." A sharp bark erupted from the shadows, and one of the beasts lunged into the clearing. Its fur was patchy, skin stretched tight over bone. A rancid odor wafted on the air. An arrow flew from one of Alaric's archers, striking it in the shoulder, but the creature barely staggered. It let out a furious snarl, charging forward. Alaric sprang into action, wielding a longsword. He sidestepped the charging wolf and slashed downward, carving a gash across its flank. The wolf yelped, spinning to snap at him. Arya darted in, sliding needle beneath its exposed jaw, feeling the blade puncture something vital. The beast collapsed, twitching, but tried to drag itself upright again. Willa stomped on its neck, plunging her sword into its skull. Only then did it go still. Another wolf bounded in from the left, tackling one of the watchmen before he could react. He screamed as jaws clamped onto his forearm. Blood spattered. A second watchman smashed the wolf's head with the butt of his spear, forcing it to release its grip. 2 more men lunged, piercing it with steel. It took 3 deep stabs before it stopped thrashing. To the right, a third creature emerged from the darkness, leaping toward an archer who scrambled back. The archer loosed an arrow at point-blank range, striking the wolf in the maw, but the momentum carried the beast forward. They both went down in a heap. Arya dashed over, slicing across the wolf's side, trying to free the archer. The wolf snapped at her with jaws reeking of decay, but she twisted aside. Another ranger came from behind, slamming a dragonglass dagger into its neck, severing its spine. It convulsed, then fell limp. Even as the last one fell, Arya heard more growls. She turned, panting, seeing flickers of movement in the tree line. There had to be at least 3 or 4 others, lurking just beyond the glow of the fire, glowing eyes fixated on the camp. "Light torches!" Arya shouted, her voice hoarse. "Keep them at bay. Archers, ready another volley if they charge." Men scrambled to thrust branches into the flames, brandishing them. The flickering light illuminated the clearing in wild shadows. Arya braced herself. She could hear the wolves circling, see glimpses of fur and bone. She counted heartbeats, waiting. Then, abruptly, the growling receded. Leaves rustled as the shape slunk back into the dark. It was as if they had tested the camp, lost a few of their pack, and now withdrew to stalk easier prey or to plot a second assault. None of them howled. The eerie silence made the hair on Arya's neck stand on end. She stood there, breathing hard, needle dripping black-red gore. Around her, men panted, eyes darting at every flicker of movement. Alaric wiped sweat from his brow, face pale but resolute. 3 of their company lay wounded, 1 seriously. Willa knelt by him, trying to stanch the bleeding. Another man was missing 2 fingers from a savage bite. The rest were shaken, but alive. Arya forced calm into her voice. "Stay alert. They might come back. Keep the torches lit. We'll stand watch till morning if we must. No one sleeps." She gestured for a few men to drag the carcasses of the wolves away from the camp, so the stench wouldn't draw more. Her mind raced. 4 white wolves, possibly more out there. The pack was larger than she'd feared. If they roamed this area, how many others prowled deeper north? Her thoughts turned grim as she realized the threat was no isolated incident. This was a sign that the magic corrupting these creatures was spreading. The rest of the night passed in tense vigilance. The wolves did not return, though occasionally they heard distant snarls. At one point, Arya thought she saw a flash of blue-white eyes in the brush, but it vanished when she blinked. Dawn arrived cold and gray, revealing the bloodied ground at the camp's edge. Exhausted men rubbed their eyes, shivered in the early chill, and silently packed up. They buried the body of the watchman who had succumbed to his wounds just before dawn. His name was Lionel, a young man from the Westerlands who had joined the watch to atone for theft. In death, his face was peaceful, the lines of fear smoothed away. Arya gave a short prayer, her voice flat with sorrow. "Your watch has ended," she said, recalling the old words. Some of the veterans murmured a quiet response. They had lost one, with 3 more wounded, and the day's journey was just beginning. They set off again, traveling more cautiously. Men rode with weapons in hand, scanning the forest. The path sloped downward, revealing the sea in the distance. By late afternoon they smelled salt on the wind. Arya led them to a small bluff overlooking the coastline, battered by gusts of spray. Far below, the water churned against rocky outcroppings. Dark, ragged shapes soared overhead. Ravens or gulls, she couldn't tell which. Hardhome lay further along the coast, perhaps another day's ride. They'd be forced to camp again somewhere in this bleak landscape. Arya wondered how many more attacks they could withstand if the wolf packs followed them. But they had no choice. They needed to see the situation at Hardhome with their own eyes. As they continued, one of Alaric's men, a grizzled fellow named Goran, rode up beside Arya. "Lord Commander," he said quietly, "forgive my speaking out of turn, but might it be wiser to return to Castle Black with what we've learned? We know the wolves are here. This is valuable intel. Going further to Hardhome might be asking for more losses." Arya glanced at him. His concern was valid. "We do have information about the packs, but we also need to know if Hardhome's deserted or if more free folk remain. We can't leave people to die if there's still a chance of rescue." Goran hesitated, then nodded. "As you say." She appreciated the man's caution. She felt it too, gnawing at her. But duty pressed her onward. She remembered the look of terror in the eyes of those refugees she'd evacuated from Hardhome. Could she really turn back without ensuring no one else was abandoned? They pressed on until dusk. This time, they found a sheltered gully near a rocky ridge, which offered some natural protection on 2 sides. They built a fire and set sentries in pairs. Most men, still rattled from the previous night, kept their weapons close. Arya walked the perimeter with Alaric, her thoughts heavy. He broke the silence first. "You are not afraid, are you?" She looked at him, startled by the question. "I'm not reckless enough to be fearless," she said. "But I've learned that fear can sharpen the senses if you let it. It doesn't rule me." Alaric nodded. "Well said. I remember King John once told me something similar. He said bravery was being scared but doing your duty anyway." A pang of memory flickered through Arya's eye. John always was wiser than most. Alaric sighed, gaze wandering to the dim horizon. "I wonder where he is now, that ghost of a king. Some say he wanders beyond the wall still, seeking to make peace with free folk. Others claim he went east, never to return." Arya felt a tightness in her chest. She had asked herself the same questions countless times. She shrugged, turning her face away. The world is vast. If Jon Snow wishes to remain lost, it may be best to let him have his peace. Alaric cast her a sidelong glance. "I understand. Still, I hope he hears that his sister leads the watch. He'd be proud." She felt a tremor of emotion. "Thank you," she managed, her voice quiet. They finished their circuit of the perimeter and returned to the camp. The night was mercifully calm. No wolves lunged from the darkness, though everyone slept with one eye open. By dawn they rose stiff and cold, but alive. Another day's travel brought them nearer to Hardhome. The coastline jutted into the sea, forming a ragged crescent where the settlement huddled. As they neared, the air grew thick with the smell of decay and brine. The wind carried a chill that felt different from the usual northern cold, something more insidious, as though ghosts slid through the gaps in the rocks. A hush fell over the group when the settlement came into sight. Hardhome's huts and wooden walls looked battered, some collapsed entirely. Smoke no longer rose from any chimney. At the edge of the settlement, a tangle of driftwood and broken boats littered the shore, as if a storm had swept through. No living soul could be seen. They rode cautiously forward. The gates stood open, one hinge torn free. Arya signaled 2 rangers to dismount and approach on foot, scanning for tracks or traps. The rest waited, hearts pounding. After a few minutes, the men waved them through. Inside, the settlement was nearly deserted. Broken crates, scattered belongings, a stray dog's carcass rotting in a corner. Seagulls pecked at refuse along the shore. It was a scene of desolation. When the group pressed deeper, they discovered signs of old blood on the ground near several huts, but no bodies. Doors hung ajar, revealing ransacked interiors. The place had the air of a battlefield after the armies left. Willa wrinkled her nose at the stench. No sign of the living. Arya dismounted carefully, tying her mare to a half-toppled post. She motioned for Alaric and a few rangers to follow her. "We'll search for anything. Journals, letters, signs of what happened." They split into small teams, moving among the silent huts. Arya pushed open a door, revealing a cramped interior where a table lay overturned, scattered plates on the floor. She saw footprints in the dust, some big, some small, as if a family once lived here. A chill crawled up her spine. Where had they gone? Had the free folk fled south, or were they taken by the wolves? She noticed a ragged bit of cloth near the door, stained with dried blood. She picked it up, frowning. A child's cloak, perhaps. She swallowed hard and set it aside. The hush in the hut pressed on her ears, and she could almost imagine ghosts whispering in the corners. Outside, she found Willa rummaging through another building. "Anything?" Arya asked. Willa shook her head grimly. "Just broken crates, a few rotted fish barrels. Whoever was here left in a hurry or was forced out. No sign of corpses, though. It's as if they vanished." Arya bit her lip. Vanished or turned. She hated the thought that more white beasts, or worse forms of undead, might be roaming. They regrouped near the waterfront. Alaric approached, his face tense. "We found several boats missing from the docks. My guess is some managed to flee by sea, but we also found smashed boats along the rocks, so not everyone escaped." Arya turned her gaze to the choppy water. "There could be survivors on the islands or drifting, but we can't sail after them now. All we can do is confirm there's no one here to rescue." "Nah." Roderick Hill's replacement, another archer named Tormund, not to be confused with Tormund Giantsbane, strolled up, carrying a bundle of sea-tangled rope. "Lord Commander, we found some tracks on the east side of the settlement leading inland, likely recent, though the winds half covered them." Arya's eyes narrowed. "How many?" "Hard to say. Maybe a few dozen. Men, women, children from the look of it. Could be refugees who stayed behind, then moved east. East from hard home led to perilous cliffs and thick forests. If they had gone that way, they might have been fleeing the wolves or seeking another route south. But that path was scarcely better than the sea." Arya considered their options. They could track the footprints, but that might lead them into another ambush. On the other hand, if there were survivors, they deserved a chance. She turned to Alaric. "What do you think?" He exhaled slowly. "We're not in a good position to stay long. We have wounded, limited supplies. The men are tired from the nightly threats. But if there are survivors, I'd hate to leave them." Arya's conscience warred with her caution. Finally, she spoke. "We'll track the footprints for a day. If we see no sign of them, or find only death, we head back to Castle Black with what we've learned. That's all we can afford." They gathered and followed the tracks. The footprints led away from Hardhome's outskirts, across a stretch of rocky beach, then up a slope of gnarled pines. The day wore on, the sun hidden behind iron-grey clouds. Occasionally they spotted broken branches, a dropped scrap of cloth, vague indications that a group had hurried this way. Every step deepened Arya's sense of foreboding. Late in the afternoon, they came upon the remains of a small camp. The ashes of a fire lay cold, half buried in drifting leaves. A scattering of footprints around it suggested a dozen or more people had huddled there. Crude shelters of branches were torn apart, as if ransacked. Arya slid from her horse and bent to examine the ashes. Cold for at least a day or two, Maybe 3. Willa squatted beside her. Could be they moved on, or were found. She pointed to a tuft of fur snagged on a nearby branch. Arya recognized the coarse, dark texture of white wolf hair. She scanned the clearing. Bloodstains marred the ground in places. No bodies, but the scene was grim. It looked like a scuffle, perhaps a frantic retreat. They may still be alive, scattered into the forest, Arya said, though her voice held little hope. Alaric came closer, an arrow knocked in his bow. There's sign of multiple wolves, claw marks on that tree. He nodded toward gashes in the bark. They're hunting these refugees. Arya felt a surge of anger, imagining families fleeing in terror, pursued by abominations. Memories of her own flight from King's Landing as a child returned, the helplessness she felt. She forced herself to focus. All right. We'll search the surrounding woods. Carefully. If we find no trace of survivors by nightfall, we must return to the wall. Nah. The group fanned out, searching in pairs. Arya and Willa moved quietly through the thickets, scanning for signs of life. The pines whispered above them, needles rustling. Rocks slick with moss made each step treacherous. She could still smell that faint odor of rot in the air, though it might have been her imagination. They discovered a single shoe near a fallen log, sized for a young girl. A short distance away they found a battered cloak pinned beneath a tangle of branches. No bodies, no footprints that led conclusively away. A hush blanketed the woods, broken only by cawing crows that watched from high limbs. Arya was about to turn back when she heard it, a faint whimper. She froze, raising a hand to halt Willa. The sound came again, a soft moan or sob, barely audible. Arya's heart pounded. She gestured for Willa to follow, and crept forward, stepping carefully around roots and stones. Behind a cluster of boulders, she found a child. A girl of perhaps 8 or 9, her hair a matted tangle, her clothes torn and stained with blood. She crouched low, pressing herself into the crevice between the rocks, as though trying to disappear. At the sight of Arya she gasped, eyes wide with terror. Arya knelt, hands open in a gesture of peace. "It's all right," she said softly. "We're not going to hurt you. We're from the Night's Watch." The girl shook her head, tears streaking her dirty cheeks. She was too frightened to speak. Willa moved slowly, removing a small water skin from her belt. She offered it, but the child only shrank deeper into the rock. Arya's throat tightened. She remembered being that young, that scared. Gently, she placed needle on the ground, palms up, to show she meant no harm. "Are you alone?" she asked. After a long moment the girl managed a faint nod. She whispered, "They got Mama. And my brother, the wolves. I ran." Arya forced a calm expression, though she felt rage boil beneath her skin. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice as gentle as she could make it. "We'll protect you now. Come, we have food and a safe camp." The child sniffled, uncertain. Then her hunger, desperation, and exhaustion overcame her terror. She inched forward, trembling. Arya gently lifted her into her arms, feeling how light and frail she was. Willa pressed the water skin to the girl's lips. She drank, coughing slightly. They made their way back to the clearing, where Alaric and the others waited. Their presence startled the girl anew, but Arya kept her calm by speaking softly. The men's faces hardened when they saw the state she was in, skin-scratched bruises on her arms. Willa took off her own cloak and wrapped the girl in it. "Any sign of others?" Alaric asked quietly. Arya shook her head. "Just her. I doubt anyone else survived." She smoothed the girl's hair. "We have to get her away from here." No one argued. Night was coming soon, and they didn't want to linger in the hunting grounds of abominations. They rode back to Hardhome's outskirts in a rush, then decided to make camp at a defensive position where the settlement's walls still stood. They could brace themselves there if attacked. Willa fashioned a small shelter for the girl near the fire, trying to coax her with bits of dried meat and water. Arya stood guard on the broken palisade, staring at the darkening sky. She had known they might not find survivors. Part of her was relieved they found even one child. Another part of her raged at the cruelty of it all. People forced to flee, hunted by undead beasts, left with nowhere safe to go. She felt a presence at her side. It was Alaric, a somber expression on his rugged face. You saved her. Arya exhaled, her breath clouding in the cold. We might be the only ones she has now. Alaric set a hand on her shoulder. We'll see her safely to the wall. Perhaps there's kin among the refugees at Eastwatch who can take her in. Arya gazed at the distant sea, thinking of how big the world was, how easily one could be lost. Yes, she said. We'll do that. The night passed quietly. No wolf attacks. Perhaps the beasts had moved on or were content with other prey. In the morning they gathered their meager findings. It was clear Hardhome was untenable, and the survivors, if any existed beyond the child, had fled or died. With heavy hearts, they turned south. The journey back proved slow, as they had to manage the wounded and keep watch for roaming packs. The child clung to Arya or Willa whenever possible, too scared to speak much. Over time she managed to give her name, Melly. She spoke in broken bits of the common tongue, betraying a free folk accent. Arya found herself fiercely protective of the girl. She remembered how she once was forced to hide in fear, how she'd lost her own mother. The cycle felt too cruel. It took them 5 days to reach the wall again. Each night they camped, they heard distant howls, but no direct attacks occurred. They were grateful for the reprieve. When at last Castle Black's looming ramparts came into sight, the entire group exhaled in relief. Crossing through the gates, they were met by stewards and black brothers who rushed to help with the injured. Arya carried Melly inside, ignoring the curious stares. She brought the girl to the infirmary, where an older woman named Salisi tended to the sick. Melly's physical hurts were minor compared to her trauma, so Celis offered gentle words and a bowl of warm broth, providing a quiet corner for her to rest. Arya lingered a moment, crouching beside Melly. The girl peered up with big, fearful eyes. Arya touched her shoulder lightly. You're safe now, she said. Rest, all right? Melly nodded, her fingers clinging to the fur on Arya's cloak before letting go. She curled under a blanket, and Arya stood to leave, her emotions churning. Her vow echoed in her mind. I am the shield that guards the realms of men. The child sleeping under that blanket was part of those realms, a living person who needed protection. It reminded Arya why she fought. She stepped out into the courtyard. Willa approached, pulling off her gloves. What now? Arya took a moment to gather her thoughts. We've confirmed Hardhome is overrun. Those who stayed behind are likely dead, the wolves are numerous, and the magic is spreading. There's no question we need a stronger response. I'll call a council with our officers, Alaric, and the most experienced rangers. We need a plan, a real plan, for dealing with this threat long term. We can't just react to attacks. We must find the source and destroy it. We must find the source and destroy it. Willa's features hardened with resolve. Agreed. Within the hour, Arya summoned her key officers to the Solar, along with Alaric and a few of his captains. The tension was palpable. Domeric Storm's old chair seemed to weigh twice as much when Arya sat in it, memories of the wasted huts in Hardhome playing in her mind. She recounted their findings, the deserted settlement, the child survivor, the increased number of white wolves. Alaric and Willa added their perspectives, describing the severity of the threat. Several rangers nodded, others swore under their breath. The new steward Jane kept notes on a sheet of parchment, her quills scratching like an anxious insect. When they finished, silence hovered. Then Garrett Rivers, head of the builders, spoke. We need more than swords. If these beasts keep spreading, they could strike anywhere along the wall. We should fortify Eastwatch and the Shadow Tower as we did in the days of the Long Night. Voila. Another man chimed in. We'll need more men for that, more supplies. Winterfell's already stretched thin. Alaric frowned. The king in the north will send what he can, but we have troubles of our own. If these whites threaten us all, perhaps it's time to reach beyond the north. The Vale, the Riverlands, even the Crownlands might help. The The memory of the dead still lingers in the minds of many. Arya weighed the suggestion. She'd once traveled those lands, seen the devastation war can cause. But would they care about a northern threat that seemed half a myth? Perhaps the scar of the long night was still fresh enough to unite them again. It's a risk, she said. Some southern lords might laugh off these tales as exaggerations, but we can try. Willa tapped a finger on the table. We'll also need to address the source of this magic. We don't know if it's a leftover from the Night King or something new. Perhaps the Citadel can offer insight, or the children of the forest if any remain. Arya felt a pang of uncertainty. She had heard rumors that some of the children still lived far beyond the wall, hidden in secret groves. Bran Stark once had visions of them. But finding them was a daunting task, and they might not be friendly. It's worth a thought, she admitted, though I'm not sure where to begin looking for them. One of Alaric's captains, a tall woman with sun-bleached hair, cleared her throat. They say a man named Tormund Giantsbane sometimes roams the far north with what remains of the free folk. If anyone knows the old stories, it might be him. Arya remembered Tormund, a loud, boisterous ally of Jon Snow. If he's alive, she said. We haven't had word of him in years. Alaric shrugged. Stranger things have happened. The council debated until lamps burnt low. In the end, they agreed on several points. They would bolster defenses at Eastwatch, send ravens to Winterfell requesting more men and supplies, petition the southern lords for aid, and consider sending a small party deeper north to seek knowledge. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a start. As the gathering broke up, Arya felt the old stirrings of restlessness. She was used to taking action herself, not just ordering others. The idea of searching for Tormund or the children intrigued her, though she knew she couldn't abandon the watch so soon. She had responsibilities here. Still, a kernel of longing lodged in her chest, the call of the wilderness, of a personal quest to root out evil at its source. For now, though, she had to leave. She thanked the officers, met Alaris' gaze with a hint of gratitude, then dismissed them. Alone in the solar, she stood by the window, looking out at the courtyard's torchlight. She thought of Melly, the orphaned girl, and countless others scattered across the frozen wastes. That was why the Night's Watch existed, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. She whispered under her breath, as though speaking to the memory of Jon Snow or her father, I will not fail them. Days turned into weeks as Castle Black braced for the possibility of renewed attacks. Word came from Eastwatch that more refugees were drifting in small groups, confirming that Hardhome had collapsed. The Shadow Tower reported sightings of strange creatures near the Frostfangs, though no direct encounters yet. The tension grew, swirling through the courtyards like a bitter wind. Ravens flew south, carrying Arya's messages to the king in the north, and to certain lords of the Vale, the Riverlands, and the Crownlands. The content was measured, describing the threat of white wolves and the potential for a greater resurgence of dark magic. Some replies trickled back, offerings of thoughts and prayers, vague commitments to send men when possible. Arya ground her teeth at the hesitancy of southern lords who seemed to have forgotten the horrors of the dead. The king in the north, however, promised to dispatch another 100 men when the snows melted enough to march. Meanwhile, more recruits came to Castle Black, many criminals or impoverished souls with nowhere else to go. Each was sworn in after minimal screening. The watch needed bodies to fill the ramparts, to guard the gates. Arya oversaw their training, splitting them into squads under Willa's supervision. She sparred with them personally at times, showing them the water dance techniques she'd refined. Some learned it quickly, others flailed. She drilled them in using dragonglass daggers, how to thrust at a white's vitals. Over and over, she repeated the lessons. She remembered Syrio Forel's voice telling her that fear cuts deeper than swords, and she tried to instill courage in these new recruits. Melly, in the meantime, stayed in the infirmary for a few days. Over time she ventured out, exploring the courtyard cautiously. Arya instructed the stewards to give her simple chores, carrying water, sorting linens, so she could feel useful. The girl rarely spoke, but she clung to Arya's presence like a lifeline. In quiet moments, Arya would walk her around the yard, pointing out the smithy, the stables, the towers. The child watched with wide eyes, her expression never far from sadness. Arya understood that weight. She had lost her own innocence in a world that cared little for it. One afternoon, as Arya sat on a bench overlooking the practice yard, Melly approached with a timid step. She held out a simple wood carving of a wolf's head, roughly hewn. "I made this," she said softly, her free folk accent coloring the words. "For you." Arya took the carving, touched by the gesture. It was crude, but she recognized the effort of a child's hands. "Thank you," she said, allowing a small smile. "Where did you learn to carve?" Melly shrugged. "My brother used to do it. He showed me how." Arya felt her heart clench. She gently ruffled the girl's hair. "It's beautiful. I'll keep it with me." The child nodded, her eyes glistening. Then she hurried off. Arya watched her go, the carving in her palm, thinking of all the brothers and sisters lost in the merciless north. That evening, she placed the carving on her bedside table, near her sheathed needle. In a sense, it reminded her of who she was fighting for, every innocent soul threatened by powers beyond their control. She recalled her father's quiet convictions, her mother's fierce protectiveness, Joan's unwavering sense of duty. All of that lived within her, guiding her as Lord Commander Dotut. No. Time slid by in this tense equilibrium. Training, sending patrols, receiving scattered reports of attacks by white wolves or sightings of other warped creatures. A few travelers claimed to see a horned bear roaming the far ice fields, its eyes glowing the same eerie light. Rumors spread of entire caravans vanishing without a trace. The watch did what it could, but they were spread thin. One day, a raven arrived from the citadel, bearing a letter written in formal script. Arya read it in her solar, Willa and Jean at her side. The words were polite but non-committal, acknowledging that reported phenomena of reanimated fauna warranted study but offering no immediate expertise. They spoke of sending a maester, if time and resources permit. Arya swore under her breath. The citadel's arrogance grated on her nerves. Men who had not seen the undead with their own eyes doubted too easily. She flung the letter onto the desk. "They'll do nothing until it's too late," she muttered. "If we can't rely on them, we'll find our own answers." Willa's brow creased. "What do you propose?" Arya thought of the old tales, of Bran, the three-eyed raven, of the children of the forest. She envisioned the haunted forests beyond the wall, the ancient heart trees that might hold memories of ages past. "We need to find the root of this magic," she said, "or at least some clue. I'm considering leading a small expedition deeper north, where the children might still hide." Willa blinked in surprise. "You want to leave Castle Black again, your Lord Commander, if something happens?" Arya exhaled. "I know. But I can't keep sending others into danger without stepping forward myself. And if we find Tormund Giantsbane or any other free folk with knowledge, that might be our best chance at discovering how to end this. The Citadel won't help in time, and we can't wait for the others to march an army of beasts down our throats." "Nah, Andy." Willa didn't argue further. She understood Arya's nature. She was no figurehead content to sit behind walls. She fought on the front lines. "When?" Arya glanced at the letter, then at Willa. "As soon as we can gather a trusted group. You, me, maybe a handful of rangers. Alaric can remain here with the bulk of his men, or he can spare one or two if he wishes. We'll leave the watch in capable hands. Ethan can handle day-to-day command with the senior officers while we're gone." Willa pursed her lips. "They won't be happy with you gone, but if you trust Ethan and the others to maintain order, we can manage. The question is, how far north are we talking?" Arya considered. "Perhaps beyond the Frostfangs into the deeper wilderness. That's where some say Tormund was last seen. It's also rumored that the children once inhabited hidden caves there." A hush filled the solar. Jane scribbled notes, her eyes wide at the prospect. Arya knew it was risky. Few had ventured so far beyond the wall and returned. But in her heart she sensed it was necessary. The watch needed answers, or they would spend the rest of their days fighting scattered pockets of abominations. She set her jaw. "We'll plan the expedition carefully. Sufficient supplies, dragonglass, and a route for retreat if needed. Let's talk to Alaric and see if he can spare a small escort." That evening, Arya convened a private meeting with Alaric, Willa, and a couple of key rangers. Alaric listened as Arya laid out her reasoning for a journey north. He scowled, arms crossed over his broad chest, but eventually nodded. "I can't deny the sense in it," he said. "But if something happens to you out there, the Watch loses its commander." Arya answered calmly, "The Watch is bigger than one person. I'm not irreplaceable. And if we don't uncover the cause of this spreading magic, none of us will survive anyway." Alaric lowered his gaze, conceding the point. "Very well. I'll remain here with most of my men to help defend the wall. But I'll send 3 of my best trackers with you, experienced in the deep forests, used to hunting in cold terrain." Arya inclined her head. "Thank you. We leave in 4 days. We'll map out a route and gather enough supplies for a month's travel just in case." No, house. They sealed the plan. Over the following days, preparations were frenzied. Arya delegated tasks to the senior officers, ensuring Castle Black's daily operations would continue smoothly. She wrote out instructions on how to handle new recruits, rationing, and any potential crises. She spoke with Melly, gently explaining that she had to go away for a while, but that Willa or a steward named Bren would watch over her. The child looked frightened but nodded bravely, clinging to Arya's hand before letting go. At dawn on the appointed day, Arya assembled her expedition in the courtyard. Willa stood at her side, clad in dark leathers and fur, a bow slung over her shoulder. 3 of Alaric's trackers waited with pack horses, their faces lined with confidence earned from years in the wild. 5 Night's Watch Rangers completed the group, veterans who knew the terrain. Each carried a mix of steel and dragon glass, plus bedrolls, food, rope, and medical supplies. Alaric approached, clasping Arya's arm. "Return with answers," he said, "and we'll hold the line." She nodded. "You'll do fine. Ethan and Gerd know their duties, and I trust you to keep the men united." He bowed. "Good luck, Lord Commander. May the old gods watch over you." She turned to mount her horse, the same lean mare she'd ridden before. She felt the eyes of the entire courtyard upon her. Some black brothers looked anxious, others admiring. She spotted Melly peeking from behind a pillar, tears glistening in her eyes. Arya raised a hand in silent farewell, then spurred the mare forward. The portcullis lifted. The gates swung wide. With Willa and the others behind her, Arya Stark, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, rode out of Castle Black once more, into the vast northern wilderness. The wind greeted them like a cold slap, and the future lay uncertain. Yet she felt oddly steady, as though every step of her life had prepared her for the unknown. Duty guided her, the vow she had taken echoing in her mind. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. She pressed onward, resolute, toward the Frostfangs, and whatever secrets lurked in that land of ice and shadow. If a spark of the other's magic still festered there, she would extinguish it, or die in the attempt. No matter the cost, she would not let the realm fall again to darkness. She had wandered the world seeking her place. Now she wore it like an emblem on her soul, the black cloak of a protector. The horses trudged into the snow-laden hills, hooves crunching ice. With each stride, Castle Black receded behind them until it was only a memory in the white expanse. Arya felt her heart quicken at the prospect of discovery and danger. She had always been a wolf at heart, drawn to the wilds, shaped by loss and forged by survival. Now she led a mission that might determine the fate of all they had fought to preserve. She took a steadying breath, and Needle's weight at her side reminded her she was never without a loyal companion. She was Arya Stark, an orphan girl, a faceless killer, a wanderer, a sister, a leader. And now, the first woman to command the Night's Watch. Over the horizon lay old magic, old terrors, and perhaps old allies. She would face them all, unwavering. She urged her mare forward, and they disappeared into the north's endless white, the wind whispering secrets that only the brave or the desperate dared to hear.